Ali, you have turned off my video. I'm seeing a message. It says you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Let me see that.
I'll try again.
Yeah, you are now co-host.
Yep. And I've even got the background the right way around, because when I first put it on yesterday to test it, it was mirrored, because I normally mirror my video.
All right, yeah. So I actually put it on the, yeah, right. I also had similar problem.
Right. It's not too bad. This laptop I've got, which I got in January or February of this year, has, I think, a better quality camera than the previous laptop I had. You still, when I move my head, you can still see blurring of the outline of my head and so on, because I don't have a green screen, but it's not too bad. So since you want us to use it, I'm happy to use it. But normally I prefer to just let people see either my study here in Manchester or the rubbish that I have in London. Also in London, my camera is lower quality, so trying to use the background has a much worse effect than this one.
Yes, you're right. Normally, I also don't use it because of the, but today I thought, okay, we will have some branding.
Right. We have another participant, although I can't see them. That's interesting. When I list the participants, I only see two panelists. Oh, we have one attendee.
Yeah, so we have a separate column for panelists and attendees.
Right.
So I think first participant.
Yeah.
Dr. Munira Alatas from Malaysia.
Yes, I can see her when I go to the attendees column.
Yeah. So we should allow a few minutes after 12 GMT.
Right.
Yeah, people are joining now.
Obviously, I've seen the agenda and running order, but I can't remember it in detail. You're going to start by introducing the event and so on. And then at some stage, you're going to hand over to me as chairman for my sort of 20 minutes.
Yes, that's right. I'm not going to speak a lot about Ireland because you will be doing it. I've seen your presentation.
Yeah.
So I'll just introduce the conference and.
Okay. And I can see the share screen is green. So yeah, I will be able to share at the right time. So I won't test it now, but I will turn it on at that stage. And as you can see, I'm wearing a lapel mic. The reason is I'm making a local recording on my phone of my voice when I present, because I find that way you get a very high quality sound recording, which I then use to convert my presentation into a video for my website and for YouTube. And the advantage of that is that you don't get any of the window of people's faces and things like that, because I'm starting clean again from my slides. I'm putting the sound into the slides.
Okay. It's good to know.
How did your meeting with the chairman of the Council of Islamic Ideology go? I know you sent me the email, but what was he like? Is this the first time you've met him?
I met him for the first time. Yeah, I mean, I met him some years ago, but at that time he was not the chairman. Mm-hmm. But as a chairman, I met him for the first time. It went very well, actually. And he, I think, received the message with great interest. And I talked about the network and work we are doing overall. And so he seemed quite interested.
He's a very influential person that we should try to stay close to.
Yes, yes. Yeah. His tenure is recently extended. It's like a 3-year tenure. And so his tenure was extended this year. So it means that he will be there for next 3 years.
Right.
I see more attendees joining in. I think we should allow maybe 5 minutes after 12 GMT to have more attendees join in the session.
Yes, I think that is long enough. I normally, when I'm chairing an event of the Muslim Jewish Forum of Greater Manchester, I normally allow about 5 minutes, but then I start, even if the number of attendees is far lower than the number of registrations, because you're not being fair to the people who come on time.
Yes. Yeah. We've got 107 registrations. Let's see how many people turn up.
Yes.
The list looks to me, the list of participants looked quite good to me.
Right.
I don't know. Let's see. Let me say hi to one of our later speakers, Azima. Hello, how are you?
Hello. Hello.
Ji Azima, assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum salam. Am I audible? Hello.
You are audible. Okay. We have not started yet.
Okay.
I saw you in the panel. I thought, okay, I'll just say hello to you.
Yeah. How are you? How's everything?
Yes, good.
Yeah, good to see you after so long.
Yes, good to see you virtually at least. Yeah.
Yeah.
We will be going on to your session after the opening one.
Yes.
So looking forward to that.
Likewise. Thank you again for this, for making part of it again. Thank you so much.
Zima, this is Muhammad Amin, the chairman of ILN. Which country are you based in?
India, Delhi.
Right.
Actually, I was born and brought up in Tripoli, but I'm Indian by national.
Right.
Yeah.
Azima participated in our last conference in Jakarta, which we organized on religious freedom.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the Indian economy is going to provide an object lesson in how a growth of religious intolerance is harmful for economic performance, because I think so many things that Narendra Modi is doing, regardless of what you think about them morally, will actually be negative for India's future economic growth.
Exactly. Yeah. Even the current situation is very pathetic. It's going in a very deteriorating conditions. I don't know what is going to happen next, but it's not a hopeful one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I can see also our one of our later speaker, Amal. She's from Tunisia. Hello, Amal. Can you hear us? Irfan Saab, Assalamu alaikum and welcome.
Wa alaikum salam, wa alaikum salam.
Happy that you are joining.
Yes, I'm glad to.
In this panel, Irfan Saab, we have Muhammad Amin with us. He's the chairman of ILN Council. Amin Irfan is our India fellow.
Okay.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
So I guess our speakers would be in the panel box, but they'll be speaking on their turn. And our attendees would be in the participant would be in the attendees box. So that's how we have separated.
Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Adi Salman.
Wa alaikum assalam. This is Amal.
Yeah, that's me. I'm sorry, maybe I haven't heard you at the beginning. I'm not sure you called me or not. You called on my name. But in any case,
I just want to make sure that you're, thank you. Thank you for joining.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I see more attendees joining, so we are just waiting for 2 more minutes, and then we will start, inshallah.
According to my computer clock, we're only waiting for 1 more minute.
You are more precise. I'm trying to create more room for attendees, but you're right. We should start in 1 minute.
Yes.
Of course, the advantage or the disadvantage of the online forum is that people can join flexibly. And so sometimes we have to, we will be expecting more to join later and some to join now. So it'll be, I think, changing.
Thank you for organizing this. It's very well organized and was a diversity of topics.
Thank you, Irfan Saab, and thank you for also participating. Right, I think it's 5 minutes past 12 GMT, and in Pakistan it is 5 minutes past 5 p.m. We are going to start the 8th International Islam and Liberty Conference, which is our first online conference, international online conference. We have organized 7 conferences before. Those were all in person in different countries. So it's a different experience for us. But I guess that all of us have used to now organizing and meeting and participating in these virtual meetings. And I do hope that this is the next time we meet in person. But for now, we are organizing this online. My name is Ali Salman, and I'm CEO of Islam and Liberty Network, which is a foundation based in Malaysia, but we have global operations through our research and public education activities, which is undertaken by our fellows and partners in different countries. Today's conference is very on diverse topics. It has both theoretical angle as well as the discussions on about Muslim societies, broadly speaking. Like our past conferences, we are trying to combine the theoretical, historical, and practical perspectives on the developments in Muslim society, particularly with respect to 3 types of freedom that we all understand are very important for progress: religious, political, and economic freedom. And we do it in the context of Muslim societies, broadly speaking. In today's conference, in the inaugural session, first of all, I'm going to invite the chairman of Islam and Liberty Network, Muhammad Amin. And then after Amin, we will be joined by our keynote speaker, who is not here yet, but I'm told that he will be in our panel session in about 7 or 8 minutes. Muhammad Amin is a chartered accountant. Before retirement, he was a tax partner in PricewaterhouseCoopers and their UK head of Islamic finance and a member of PwC's UK supervisory board. And in retirement, Amin divides his time between several political and interfaith organizations, mentoring individuals, and writing and speaking in the media. And you can know more about him at his website, muhammadamin.com. He has been a very significant contributor in our work, and I look forward to his presentation. I'm sure all of you do. So Muhammad Amin, this is over to you now. You can begin your presentation.
Thank you, Ali. Right, I should now be showing you my presentation on the first slide. Depending on where you are in the world, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Assalamu alaikum and peace be with you. As the chairman of the ILN Council, I have only one task today. Together, that is to welcome you. Together, you, the presenters, and you, the audience, are engaged in a vital and very difficult and important mission. And that mission, being very frank about it, is to help achieve peace and prosperity. Peace and prosperity everywhere, but especially in Muslim majority countries, which need both of those things quite desperately. That's the only thing that I'm going to say as ILN chairman. And this page of my presentation is the only slide with the ILN logo on it for that reason. But Ali has also given me time to share my personal views about why I think ILN is vital, and that's what I'm going to do now. This is what I'm going to cover very briefly, and obviously all the slides will be available to participants afterwards if they want them. Ali's already told you about myself. I come from a very poor family. My parents were both illiterate. I was born in Pakistan, but I've lived in the UK since the age of 2. And the older I get, the more grateful I feel that I live in a country where I can say anything I wish about anybody. I have been very rude to our Prime Minister on social media, and I never worry about being arrested as a result of doing that. I'm involved in many organizations, which I'm not going to name now, but there's a full list on the About Me page of my website, and the URL of my website is already also on the bottom of this page. I want to take a very brief look at the world as it stands today. And I took a list of countries ranked GDP per capita. You can't read them, but they're listed here from the richest on the left to the poorest on the right. And I've colored the members of the OIC green because membership of the OIC, the Organization of Islamic Cooperation, is a simple objective measure for countries that either are Muslim majority or have very large Muslim minorities and wish to be associated together. And you can see that they're clumped towards the poorer end of the table. There are 6 on the far left. These are rich oil states with small populations apart from Saudi Arabia, but they're rich simply because they have a lot of oil under the ground. And without throwing lots of statistics at you, when you look at indices of economic freedom, indices of political freedom, indices of religious freedom, you get a very clear message. Richer countries, more peaceful countries have more religious, political, and economic freedom, and poorer countries have less. And you can either say that is correlation, or you can say that one causes the other. And in my view, it's very clear that one does actually cause the other, that if a country can increase its religious, political, and economic freedom, its economy will work better, it will be a more peaceful country. We're talking about religion, and religious beliefs matter. Most fundamentally, they matter after death. I'm a Muslim for very deep sort of personal reasons, and I hope to find out after I die that I was right. If I am wrong, I will never know. But religious beliefs also matter during our lives. And that's what I'm going to look at now. And the first reason why a country is rich in 2021 is very simple. It was rich in 2020. Because countries don't change overnight from being very rich to very poor or very poor to very rich. But it's worth looking back at the history. The very first country in the world to industrialize was the United Kingdom. And in the United Kingdom, the first city to industrialize was the city of Manchester, where I'm talking to you from today. And then industrialization spread. It spread to Western Europe, it spread to the United States. What's quite interesting is that a third place that it spread to was Japan. Japan, rather than Ottoman Turkey, for example, which is right next door to Europe and had very large amounts of interchange with Europe. And I often think about the contrast between Japan and Ottoman Turkey. Japan was a very backward feudal agrarian society until the American black ships came in 1853. And they decided to turn their entire society upside down with the Meiji Restoration because they knew how backward they were compared with America. And 50 years later, they defeated a European power, Russia, in war, both on land and at sea. Compare that to Ottoman Turkey, which was next door to Europe, but it failed to industrialize, it failed to promote mass literacy. And I want to recommend a book to you by the American Jewish scholar Bernard Lewis, What Went Wrong? And while the title implies that it's about the Middle East, it's not about the Middle East, it's just about Ottoman Turkey. And he goes into great detail about how often the Ottomans would send study delegations to places like France, how they would half absorb the lessons, but they were not willing to make the fundamental changes to Ottoman society that they needed to make, which is why Turkey never changed the way that Japan changed. Another pair of countries that I've compared in the past, these notes, this slide is from a talk I gave a few years ago about the importance of government. And in 1950, South Korea was a little bit richer than Pakistan in income per person. By 2013, that difference was a ratio of 7 times, more than 7 times. And if we looked at the 2021 numbers, I think they will be even more extreme, although I haven't bothered looking for the latest numbers. And the reasons for that come down to the quality of government, the quality of society, the level of freedom that these countries have. And I wrote an article for the Islam and Liberty Network, which you can find on its website, the URL's at the bottom. And it was about the very big picture question of why are Muslim majority countries lagging behind? And of course, the only thing that Muslim majority countries really have in common is that they are Muslim majority. And the point I made in that article, regardless of what you think is right or wrong in terms of the afterlife, and only in the afterlife can we ever know, some religious beliefs and practices help you to succeed in this world, and some are very harmful. And I didn't want to illustrate that article with reference to specific Muslim groups or Muslim organizations, because that way you just become very unpopular and people stop listening to you. Instead, I looked at 2 separate groups of Christians, the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. And one group has beliefs that are very harmful to personal and economic and even health success, and the other group has outstanding beliefs. In fact, I've said of the Mormons that I can't think of any religious group that is more conducive to success in this world. I'm not a Mormon because I don't believe in Mormonism. I am Muslim. So moving on to ILN's mission. This is the mission of ILN as written down now. The ILN Council recently went back to our mission statement, asked whether it was as good and well written as it could be, and we amended it. We didn't change its principle or its objectives, we just changed the words. And the key thing to remember, while this looks like motherhood and apple pie, which is an American phrase, which means that it's a statement of the obvious and everybody should agree with it, there are many, many Muslims who do not believe in religious, political, and economic freedom. And our goal, our challenge, quite simply, is to persuade them to change their minds. And how do we achieve that change? We need courage. In many countries, I mean, I'm fortunate living in the UK, I can say anything I want without worrying about it. But speaking is dangerous in many countries. And even in safe countries like the UK, you may find that your Muslim friends no longer want to talk to you. Our work has to be academically rigorous. There is no point saying things that other people can prove are wrong. And we have to be clear and honest with ourselves. The backwardness of Muslim majority countries is not an accident. And the reasons are fundamentally internal and not external. And yesterday, when I showed this presentation to my wife, her first reaction was, it would be great if other countries would stop meddling in our, Pakistan. That is not the answer. The fundamental problems that our countries face are internal, and the solutions have to come from amongst ourselves. Each of us, all of us separately, can do something, and together I believe we really can change the world. And that is why I'm passionate about the Islam and Liberty Network. And that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amin. I think you have elaborated the whole objective of the ILN very clearly, and in line with the mission which Amin just shared. This conference is hopefully contributing to the advancing of understanding of the three types of freedom that we all here, consider important for the development. Our keynote speaker is Ubaidullah Bahir, who has joined us, and in a moment I'm going to invite him to share his thoughts. And we will have a time for discussion after Ubaidullah's speech, where we can have comments maybe on Amin's presentation and also Ubaidullah's speech that we are going to listen. Ubaidullah is based in Afghanistan, and I think, as Amin mentioned, the very first thing which was mentioned was courage. And I think you have to be very courageous to be in Afghanistan and still speak about these matters in the current context. So we are very grateful that Ubaidullah has joined us. He lectures at American University in Afghanistan, as well as in Kardan University. He is a visiting scholar at the New School in New York. And he has previously served as an advisor at the High Council for National Reconciliation in Afghanistan. He works for peace and reconciliation, but given the ongoing crisis in Afghanistan, he is currently also leading efforts, which is called Save Afghans from Hunger, where he provides monthly food items to desperate families in Afghanistan. So the issue is definitely not just the political system, but also the current issues of social protection. So without further ado, I'm going to request Ubaidullah to start his speech. And can you turn on your video also, if possible, Ubaidullah?
Apparently, you have to turn on my video because I don't have that right. Since we're talking about liberties, I haven't been granted that liberty.
Here you go. Because now you have it.
Okay, wait, I can't see myself. Can I see myself? Start video. Yeah, oh, I'm here. Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. We've had a very busy day today as well. We were trying to reach out to a few families, and every day in Afghanistan presents its unique set of challenges. And again, there is no manual, there's no guide that you can just pick up and look at the 1, 2, 3s as to how to deal with a society that has just been changed and gone topsy-turvy. So again, hopefully within this discussion that we have for the 30 minutes that we do, I'll be giving you enough thought experiments to hold on to and hopefully discover or dwell into deeper in the discussion part of this talk. So I thought it was only fair for us to get into any discussion with regards to Afghanistan and the case for liberties and potential for a dialogue with the Taliban. I think it's only fair if we set some context to how we arrived here, because it's a very important part of understanding where you are is to understand what the process was that led you to be where you are. A very interesting remark given by Zabiullah Mujahid, the spokesperson of the Taliban recently, was that we didn't intend to intensify our fighting until we heard President Ashraf Ghani say that he was going to fight at his extreme for the next 6 months. That means that the Taliban in one way were challenged into the scale with which that they fought. There's a lot to be said with regards to what happened during that fighting. Any military tactician would tell you that a lot of what happened in Afghanistan wasn't a failure of the armed troops or equipment as much as it was a failure of management. So the planning of the war, the execution of it was a blunder. We saw tactics like tactical retreats happening across rural areas and provinces, which literally gave away the only advantage that the Afghan Defense Forces had. For example, if they were going to use aerial bombing or if they were going to use heavy artillery, their advantage was going to be if the fighting had happened in the rural areas. By giving up the rural areas, they gave up the basic necessity of a buffer zone that could have helped them in defending urban centers. And look, at the end of the day, whenever we look at peace and reconciliation, a very important model to look at is Gladys's escalation model. And it says that, and it's a spiral, and the spiral keeps going in intensity with regards to how much grievances we have for each other. And the last stage of it is together into the abyss, where you reach a point where it honestly does not matter whether you are going to be there to celebrate the victory or not, as long as your victory becomes irrelevant. What is relevant is the defeat of your opponent. And we saw that happening with the Republic as well. Once that grievance and the war ended up becoming such a complex personal problem and became an existential threat to those in power in the Republic, we saw them take actions in which, at the end of the day, we ended up in a society that we are in right now. And we'll look into exactly how, if they had conducted themselves better, or if the reality of the defeat were accepted beforehand, we would have been able to salvage much more than what we have right now. But also, I think it's important to point out that there was a specific desire from the Taliban to take over Afghanistan through a political process as well. What does that mean? I think everyone saw Secretary Blinken's remarks the other day, where they said that we sat down with President Ashraf Ghani and we discussed that we were going to hand over power to the Taliban. I know this personally as well, because on the day President Ashraf Ghani fled, the Taliban even then reached out to people like Karzai, like Dr. Abdullah, like Mr. Hekmatyar, in which they were trying to create a cohesion committee that would then have some sort of political handover of power to the Taliban. Unfortunately, it happened in a way where the military institutions got dissolved, people laid down their arms, and it was complete lawlessness for almost up to 30 hours in Kabul, which forced the Taliban's hand of marching into Kabul. That itself was problematic as well, not only with regards to the international recognition cause that they had, but also with regards to the patrons that were supporting the Taliban and how it put them in a difficult situation with them. And as we all saw, once the takeover happened, the Taliban came in with a total victory. There was a huge incongruence between what they were saying and what they were doing. We saw in specific areas like Panjshir and others where mass atrocities were committed. On the other end, the Taliban had promised amnesty, which was delivered in specific areas. We saw that the Taliban kept saying that they had an issue with the brain drain of the country. They wanted people to stay, but then we saw treatment of people being beaten up for wearing suits in Afghanistan, women demonstrators being whipped on the streets, and so on and so forth. All of this, the promise for women's education and the ban that we still see persisting, all of those sort of violated the little trust that already existed between the Taliban and the urban population. And we have to dissect that population now as well to understand exactly how Afghanistan breaks down as an entity as well. But also on the other end, I think we all have to realize what the nature of the Taliban movement is, because if we're going to talk about engaging with them, and if we're going to talk about getting promises from them, we need to understand as to how they're structured. And there's a lot of literature, including that by Antonio Gustuzzi, that talks about the Taliban movement being more of a fluid insurgency, and that setup being a decentralized group of different splinters worked in their favor, because that meant that you didn't have to spend time risking the safety of the central leadership by communicating everything. So it was more like contractual work. So you would go, you would conduct operations, and then you would come back to the procurement committee and sell that operation too. So everyone was, there were specific symbolic processes like the flag, like the leadership that they agreed upon, but the tactics and the approach was quite different in different areas. And that itself is becoming a problem when they're trying to govern now as well, because a lot of different groups have contributed in different ways. And now the whole idea of who gets how much of the pie, and then the lack of subjugation to a specific taller order or organization is becoming a problem for the Taliban. So the whole attempts at trying to attain a certain level of cohesion. On the other end, the Taliban have always had the ISIS breathing down on their necks, not only now that they've become government, but also when they were engaging in talks, because a lot of Talib commanders were switching sides and defecting to ISIS because the whole holy war and narrative that they'd engaged into, ISIS was trying to tell them that, look, the Taliban central leadership has sold off that cause. So you really need to find your way back to the original cause meant for you by God. And even now, the Taliban really have to keep appealing to their fighters to make sure that they're not lost in this whole mix. And then lastly, with regards to the context, and before we actually move into the dialogue, we have to understand that this whole narrative of the gains of the past 20 years is just such a farce. And it is exactly that failure, the failure of those gains to trickle down into the actual population, that ended up creating the situation that we live in right now. What do I mean? I mean that certain urban centers, the lives for the common people there jumped drastically, and they went from not being educated, not being exposed, not having liberties, to having this specific model that the West was trying to implement, compared to the majority of the Afghan population in the rural areas that saw no difference in their lives in the past 20 years. Maybe even saw a reduction in the quality of life in the past 20 years. What it meant was the only thing that was better back then was at least they were receiving some form of justice, and the large-scale governmental corruption was making sure those urban, these rural population people were being locked out of that as well, which is where the major indifference that they had towards the previous regime comes from. Now that we've established all of that, right? So what happens? What happens now? One thing that I've kept repeating is the us and them narrative is gone, because right now we are stuck in one country, one city, face to face, no more barriers between us, and we really have to find a way to work together. And here's where the complexities that are introduced by something such as an intractable war that we had in Afghanistan. Intractable conflicts have this definition of having persisted for almost 2 decades. And that's something that happened in Afghanistan. At the very core of being able to convince your fighters to fight for almost 2 decades is the concept of othering. And as long as you keep telling your fighters that this is the stereotype, archetype of your enemy that we're fighting, they have a reason to keep fighting forward. And that happened to us as well, right? So the people within the cities were being told by the government through different narratives that these are outsiders, the Taliban are foreign proxies, foreign agents taking forward a foreign agenda, and so on and so forth. And they had the same thought process as well. So this whole othering was helping keep cohesion amongst the groups as well. But it also creates a huge problem for when we try to reconcile. And now that we've gotten together, there are preconceived notions that we hold, that they hold against us, which makes it very difficult to bridge that gap and have some serious communication as well. And part of this whole othering process is that we end up creating different truths between us, right? So for imagined communities, for example, why are 6 young men sitting in a room eating popcorn, cheering at a TV? Because they've been told that they all belong to this imagined community of a fan club for a specific sports team. Same goes for movements that are ideologically driven, politically driven. They imagine themselves as a community that share this common truth. What is that common truth of the sports fans? Is that they like this team, right? And the common truth of these political movements is that this is a specific cause that we're willing to die for. So there are specific truths that they believe in, and there are specific truths that we believe in. And this is where the whole concept of a Gandhian synthesis arrives as well, where for a society to be sustainable after a victory from one end, there has to be a synthesis between both visions in which we arrive at a middle point. So, one of the problems with regards to the gains that I talked about earlier in the past 20 years wasn't just that it didn't trickle down to the rural population. It was also that this ended up becoming the education of women and the workforce having women contributing in it all ended up being presented as something very Western. And that itself creates a problem because the Taliban then tend to resist such natural parts of the society, thinking that these two were part of the gains that were done in the past 20 years. And we have to find a way to break that down and try to make sure such a challenge is not posed towards such fundamental aspects of what we had gained in the past 20 years. So we have to learn to avoid using that rhetoric because it ends up creating more sensitivities than it solves. Now, another problem here is coming back to the Gandhian synthesis. And here we have to understand that any absolutist ideology that is basically working on eradicating the other. For example, Marx and Engels say, oh, the proletariat, the bourgeoisie are ruling our society, they're exploiting us, and the solution is to overthrow them and basically rid society of them. So the only way the society exists and is sustainable if there's just one social order that exists and one group that becomes absolutely powerful. And those are always problematic ideas because A, you can never eliminate someone who holds a different vision than you. B, because it's never sustainable. Because if you've seen recent interviews of Talib fighters, they keep saying, oh, it's very easy to fight ISIS. We find them, we kill them, we move on, right? And really fighting fire with fire has barely ever worked in counterinsurgency as well. So you have to have a certain level of nuance when it comes to that. Which also means that when you're coming in and your whole idea is to push your opponent out of the political landscape, it means that you are perceiving yourself as better than another group. So even in Marx's idea, the proletariat are better people morally as well compared to the bloodthirsty, hungry, greedy bourgeoisie, right? And here as well, the problem then is that we are moving into a society where the Taliban having taken over. Sure. So basically what happens is that the Taliban believe in this specific social hierarchy, and you can sense that when you go out into the roads and deal with their fighters, you would realize that you get that sense that they believe that they were God's people and God's army that had won the battle and were right now ruling the people that had chosen not to live under their regime. So there's A, residue of the othering, B, a sense of being holier than thou, which sort of hinders the communication process as well. And look, I'm building here towards the idea of how difficult it is to have that dialogue, and then we'll understand as to what the possible ways are available to us. So also that being said, a lot of times people think that when you have a totalitarian regime, they don't need voting, so they don't really care for what people's opinion of them is. This is not true when it comes to theocratic totalitarianisms. What does that mean? That means that when you are in power because of a group's political ideology or religious ideology, that means you really have to keep living up to that vision of that ideology, because there's huge reputational costs associated to what you stand by. There's also an issue of fungibility. What does that mean? That means if me and Ali right now have an issue over a can of Pepsi, right? And he wants it, I want it too. We can eventually reach a point where we're like, okay, you drink half of it, I'll drink half of it, and we'll walk away. Or based on who's more muscular, they get the lion's share and the other gets a little less. With regards to religious ideology, very often we view the points of contention as absolute as well. What does it mean? That means the state can either be Islamic or it can be secular. It cannot be both at the same time. That means that we can either have an Islamic implementation for this opinion or something that's completely un-Islamic. There's always one specific alternative that is correct, right? And that creates an issue with regards to dialogue as well, because 101 of dialogue and negotiation, you go in with your first priority, then you're always going to have your second best alternative as a backup as well, right? So that process ends up becoming a tad bit difficult. So that all being said, the Taliban are in power, they have their problems. There is a specific trust gap that exists. The Taliban are now here. Ideally, what should have happened was you would have political elite in Afghanistan that would have negotiated with the Taliban saying, hey, these are our red lines, and these are the most important issues to us. We represent this specific population. Make sure that girls get educated, make sure that women contribute in society, make sure that there's freedom of press, and so on and so forth. And the Taliban would have signed off on something like that. At least we would have something like that in writing. But what happened was the way the Taliban took over, and because the government had gone into the abyss with them with its escalation, they chose to flee over having that discussion. When that discussion didn't happen, everyone who did not completely align with the Taliban thinking fled the country. That means complete political cleanse happened with regards to the political elite. Meaning that those who chose not to leave the country, those who either did not have the option either, they all stayed, but they didn't even have anyone to represent them in engaging in that dialogue with the Taliban, right? And the other issue with something that I already talked about, was the idea that this absolute takeover brought in some level of arrogance, brought in some distance between the Taliban and their patrons. So their patrons could have turned around and forced the Taliban into giving up specific ideas and specific policies in order to gain legitimacy. But since the Taliban now had the sense that they had, with their own might, taken over all of Afghanistan, this constant repetition of the idea that we took over a country in 11 days, which on paper sounds like the most successful military campaign in modern history, right? So that gives them a specific arrogance that stops them from basically listening to sense. Now, the problem is there is a complete lack of nuance with regards to engagement with the Taliban. What does it mean? It means the United States turns around and says, I have the lion's share of your $9 billion in federal reserves, which is definitely Afghan money. It is Afghan private bank money. It is Afghanistan's federal reserve, but I'm not going to release it because this is my way of imposing sanctions on you. I know your hospitals, every 2 out of 3 hospitals in Afghanistan depend on the World Bank's budget of $600 million to function. We're going to put sanctions on that. Why? Because at the end of the day, unless you compromise on this, and that, we're not going to release this money. Besides the whole idea of sanctions being so counterintuitive when you have an authoritarian regime, what does that mean? That means in a democracy, at least you can put sanctions, the people feel the pain, people stop voting for their leaders, leadership changes. In an authoritarian regime, the only thing you're doing with sanctions is you're putting so much pain on the people that you're pushing them towards the regime so that they can at least have some level of respite. So basically, the international community right now needs to understand that imagined communities that we talked about, groups that have a specific ideology that they stand by, an identity, they only consume information, new information, from people they can relate to. That means that as soon as the United States turns around and says, you have to do this, it becomes a matter of reputation, it becomes a matter of fungibility, it becomes a matter of identity, it becomes a matter of how you are more answerable to your own fighters, and you cannot compromise on that. So when you challenge a sacred value, so there are different values that you can negotiate about, but once you challenge the sacred values that are at the core of someone's identity, then they feel like they will betray their own selves if they agree to you. That means they start showing more rigidity. What is then the alternative for that, right? And the alternative then is that there are Afghans within the country, Afghan youth, educated urban elite, that would like to have that dialogue for their rights and for these important discussions. But right now, because of a complete absence of trust, because they think that we represent a Western agenda and not an Afghan agenda, and because they are yet to realize their own limitations, all of those are hindrances. Also, when the West tries too hard to push Afghan civil society and make them relevant, it sort of paints them back in a Western agenda light as well. So in the absence of these options, the question that you would be asking right now is, what options do we have moving forward? And since we don't have space for political activism, for example, if we go out and start demonstrating on the streets, what happens is the Taliban, who have had no training in controlling crowds, are going to show very different reactions to those demonstrations. Eventually, someone is going to open fire. The Taliban leadership, based on how they are as an ideological movement, will never punish those perpetrators, because punishing them betrays their core identity and then opens doors for people to keep leaving the group as well towards other much worse groups like ISIS. And because it blows up the bridge that can be built between us and the Taliban to have that discussion. Then what do we do, right? The solution is that we start finding spaces, right? We find ways in which the Taliban have no other option but to acknowledge our existence. What does that mean? That means when Afghans choose to go into things as social welfare and digital media, we start creating a space where the Taliban have to engage with us. For example, the humanitarian in Afghanistan has the potential of becoming the worst humanitarian crisis in human history, right? That itself presents an opportunity, a blessing in disguise, right? Which means that people like me and others in Afghanistan can start social welfare services that the Taliban are failing to provide the local population. And that means if I pick up the phone and I call a Talib governor and I say, I'm a lecturer at the American University, the conversation is over before it even started. And I think we have a very famous quotation by an Israeli prime minister that says that for negotiations and dialogue to succeed, it has to start first. So the conversation ends right there. But if I call him up and I say, hey, I have food supplies for 50 to 100 families, and I want to distribute them in your province, then that governor is going to meet me, he's going to have a discussion with me, and we will have a communication process set up. That means when he sees me as the person that I am, he has no other option but to accept that there are people that are not typically Talib and they are doing good for the country. One, digital spaces. Now, one of the major problems is that we end up diverting our energy into the wrong avenue. For example, a lot of Afghans right now and people who, the diaspora especially as well, are using so much energy and projecting that into Twitter profiles, which means that, and this is the problem with social media, right? Social media, you have this off button, you have this block button. That's a huge problem because that is your natural human inclination of creating an echo chamber, because it's very difficult to wake up every day and hear 100 criticisms for what you believe in. But it's really easy to create a group of yes people around you that believe in your idea and keep supporting you. Now, the problem is the elites are speaking to the elites about the elites, right? And that then ends up becoming an echo chamber that doesn't help Afghanistan as a whole. So what do? We start going up to digital news channels in Afghanistan that are watched by the common Afghan people and start creating discourse there. A famous story that I love to reiterate to people is I've spent so many hours on conferences, on Twitter, and yet when I go on Voice of America or another channel that plays on normal people's TVs, I'm approached by a fruit seller who appreciates my work and recognizes me and doesn't even want to take money for the fruit that I'm getting, right? Just to show you as to how quick a communication channel can be established there. So and when we are there, that means we are conducting shows that don't have to be politically controversial, but they're shows that are giving a platform to every side of the conflict and helping Afghans see what is happening in their country. So, for example, a show that talks about the humanitarian crisis, a show that talks about the Afghan economic crisis right now, a show that talks about how Afghanistan sports is going to look like. All of those are going to be discourses that are going to bring the Taliban closer to the population and help create a sense of accountability. Look, the Taliban might have limited rationality, but we've already seen modification in their behavior from time to time based on the pressure of the general population and criticism. And this criticism, when it comes from the local population, and it can be done in a constructive, correct way, because one thing that I want you guys to realize, and I don't think that betrays my ideology either, is I don't want the Taliban to fail, because whatever it is, we came to this peace after 20 years of fighting, after more than a few decades of fighting. And it's about time that we find a post-conflict society to exist in, because number one priority is physical security, because you cannot have economic prosperity, you cannot have freedoms, you cannot have anything unless there is physical security. We have that now to a great extent. And if we keep on trying and hoping for the Taliban to fail, because there is no democratic process for change of regime, that means for the Taliban to go away would be like like pulling off cotton from thorns or silk from thorns, because it's going to take so much effort and so much more bloodshed in Afghanistan for the regime to change. So the only option now is accept ground realities. Let's not dig our head into the sand. Let's face the Taliban. Let's create spaces in which they are forced to interact with us and change with them, change them day by day until we reach a space where there is some level of reconciliation, because we need a sustainable Afghanistan now. We need to avoid further bloodshed and war. And we need to help the Taliban figure out the role that is now upon them, because they're not an insurgent group anymore. And they really have to start recognizing their sovereignty as a right, as a responsibility rather than a right. Once that happens, everything else will follow. The chips will start falling in place, and hopefully we can have a prosperous Afghanistan. Thank you for listening to me. I'm sorry if I took up more time than I should have. And hopefully we can have a constructive discussion based on these ideas. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ubaidullah. No, I'm glad that you took your time, and I'm sure that we have all been very educated by your comprehensive discussion, not just a theoretical framework, but also providing a real feel from the ground, and also pointing out possible solutions in this crisis, in the moments of crisis. We are going to have a discussion time with our participants and other fellow speakers. We have participations, from various countries. I can see friends from New York, Jakarta, India, Morocco, Tunisia, Pakistan, and many other countries in this meeting. And I'm sure that these diverse perspectives would be very helpful to understand the bigger picture. Now I'm going to request the attendees that they have these two options. They can raise hand, and they can speak in as a question or as a comment, and also they can type in a question in the Q&A box. And similarly, the option is available for our speakers, panelists who are already in the panel, and they also can contribute. I see Amal from Tunisia raising her hand. So I'm going to request Amal to please share her question or thought. Amal, can you speak?
Hello, Assalamu alaikum again. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Amal. Please.
Okay, thank you very much. Dr. Ali, thank you to your panelists. My question is to Prof. Mohammed Amin. In his question, very, very important question, he said the following: why must majority countries, or are most majority countries lagging behind? This is, I think, a crucial civilizational question. In his answer, among the answers he gave, he mentioned, for example, the religious beliefs. He mentioned also the backwardness of these countries. And this backwardness, according to Prof. Mohammed Amin, is due to the lack of religious, political, and economic freedom. My question is the following. Let me start from my country, Tunisia. In Tunisia, which I think it's a counter example, this is my opinion at least, it's a counter example. We have recently, until recently at least, until before July the 25th, what you call a sort of very, very progressive constitution, liberal constitution, democratic constitution with religious, political, economic freedom. But instead of that, we still lag behind. We still are unable. I mean, this experience is still unable to deliver. We are still among the backward countries. So I know maybe you can answer me. We have been only for 10 years in this experience, and 10 years is nothing in people's in the history of people and societies. But still, I'm convinced there should be other reasons also, in addition to, I mean, for example, here in Tunisia, structurally speaking, there are reasons. There is a structural analysis of how power is distributed, for example, in society, within society, economically speaking and politically speaking, and how the political settlement itself is settled in addition. Because we saw that you can have the best of constitutions, you can also have freedoms in reality. Actually, we have these freedoms, but there is something which is still is not working. So I'm not sure if Professor Mohammed Amin is following me and can react to what I've been just saying or asking. Thank you very much.
Certainly glad to answer. First of all, I'm not a professor. I'm plain Mr. I'm not even doctor. I don't claim to be an expert on Tunisia, but I do have some thoughts which I'm happy to share with you. First of all, remember I said a country is poor in 2021 because it was poor in 2020, and it takes time. And for many decades, Tunisia was ruled by a dictatorship where there was no political freedom, and as far as my understanding is also incredibly limited economic freedom. And it's only for 10 years that you've had the freedoms that you had until recently, when your president basically staged his own coup. You can tell me about economic freedom in Tunisia better than I can, but my question, for example, if a company in a foreign country wishes to come to Tunisia, buy some land and start a business, how many permissions does it require? Is it even possible? About 7 or 8 years ago, I looked at the rules in some Arab countries, and Tunisia was not one of them. And they often have incredibly difficult rules, which make it, one country I looked at made it impossible for foreigners to own land in that country. Those are examples of what I regard as the absence of economic freedom. How easy is it for a foreign business to come and establish in Tunisia without requiring government permissions? Because every time you need permission from the government to do something, that's a reduction in economic freedom. And I do not believe that Tunisia has economic freedom at all.
Thank you, Mr. Mohammed Amin. Thank you.
Thank you, Amin. I'm going to, we have actually a few questions already. And if I'm going to request Munira, she has typed in a question. If you like, you can also let me see if you can speak in the panel. It will be helpful for Munira. Can you now speak?
Sure. Thank you, Ali. And thank you, Ubaidullah Bahir, for your presentation, as well as Mohammed Amin. I enjoyed listening to you. Dr. Bahir, my question is about the social outlook of Afghans as well as the Taliban, Afghan society, with respect to the role of women. And I typed my question, but specifically I referred to misogyny, this attitude towards women, which does not exist only in Muslim societies. But of course, you know, in Malaysia, which is where I am, we have this similar attitude. So I was wondering if the conditions that under which women are subjected to, is it less a problem of Islam or religion and more a cultural or a misogynistic attitude that prevails in Afghan society? Thank you.
Thank you so much for that question. I'll give a clarification like Mr. Amin said as well. I'm not a doctor yet. So get back to me in a few years and hopefully we should be able to use that term. But with regards to misogyny in general, I keep saying that misogyny is not an Afghan thing, it's a man thing, right? And you put enough men together and they will figure out a way to be misogynist. But especially within Afghanistan, and we sometimes accuse the Taliban of not practicing Islam, but practicing Pashtunism, right? And the Pashtun culture in itself has, because of lack of development, really not evolved with time as well. And obviously, once you provide basic needs, once you start understanding even the economic utility of women actually going out and contributing within society, you start seeing change within the society. That hasn't happened in Afghanistan. It's mostly because it's been the most economically depraved country for years and years. And here's the trickle down thing as well. Like the gains ended up making a huge difference for an urban population, but really didn't affect anyone in the rural population. So right now, that's why you don't see a lot of resistance with regards to whatever they have to say about women from people from the rural areas, but the urban elite then have a huge issue with such fundamental rights being violated. As to how does that change, I've actually previously written about this, I think, for the Washington Post, in which I talk about how, like Iran and Saudi Arabia, it starts with you getting enough space to start work. For example, if you get them to, I was more than happy with them going with segregating classes or putting curtains between classes, as long as it means that women are there in the university, because you will have to make compromises. You have to start small and then hope that with time, you grow on the Taliban and they start understanding that. So for example, in Saudi Arabia, it was purely an economic thing where Saudi Arabia realized that if they locked out half of their population, they couldn't economically prosper. They couldn't rely on a perishable commodity such as oil till eternity. So we're hoping that sense eventually prevails. So for now, create enough spaces to keep moving forward, hoping that an economic prosperity ends up creating a change in culture with regards to the rural areas as well, and then one step at a time from there.
Okay, thank you. I will look up your writing in the Washington Post, and anyway, the answer you gave is satisfactory. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Munira. I'm going to request Dr. Khalid Masood to kindly share his question. Khalid Saab, you can now speak. Khalid Masood Saab is from Pakistan, and he has been with our network in the past and as a keynote speaker. And a very well-known scholar around the world. Khalid Saab, can you please speak?
Yeah, I think my question is very clear if you can read it. What I'm asking is that outside the Afghanistan, we are experiencing as if it is an impasse that between Taliban and the American proposal to move Afghanistan towards progress. So are these two quite contradictory approaches, or is there a middle way between?
A term that we use often is that the West and the Taliban are in a staring competition, and there are people dying all around, but it's just the staring that's going on. And we really need to prioritize. Yes, there are differences of opinion and differences of vision, but all of that can be sorted out in the coming months and years. So for example, what is important to understand is this scale of human suffering that is happening in Afghanistan, which means that the longer the sanctions remain and the longer there is a complete absence of a working relationship, Afghans will keep suffering. So that discussion probably needs to go on a back burner. And right now we need to figure out a way which goes just short of international recognition, but is above having sanctions on the Taliban. And there are ways of the international community enabling civil societies within Afghanistan to provide fundamental work that will help the cause of creating spaces from within Afghanistan, so that change in vision, if there is going to be any alignment with the West or even coming to a common ground, has to happen organically from within Afghanistan. No amount of pressure on the Taliban is ever going to get them to compromise on core values that they stand by, because the moment they do that, they lose their own fighter base, they lose their own identity as well. So there is an impasse, but right now, human suffering and curtailing that should be prioritized, and any reconciliation and vision has to come bottom up, has to be organic, has to be from within Afghanistan. And that support from the West then has to be nuanced. For now, figuring out a working relationship to avoid the worst possible humanitarian crisis ever in Afghanistan should be prioritized.
Khalid Saab, any follow-up?
No, I think that Taliban, what I have heard them speak, that whatever experience we have before, that's going to continue. And they are insisting that this is Islamic teachings and we cannot go back to it. So then when they get recognition from the international community, then they are stronger because they have Islam on their side and the international community on their side.
Look, something that Ali Bhai, I want to point out here as well, and I think it's a very important discussion to be had with regards to Islam and generally the traditionalist approach that the Taliban have. Now, obviously, traditionalism has its limitations where you constantly base your understanding of the social and political order on religious script and your interpretation of it. And especially by virtue of the Taliban claiming to be mullahs means that they have this authority and this privileged access to that interpretation and to that text, something that you don't have. So any negotiation or dialogue with them is problematic. And any reconciliation that might happen would have to first be based on the Taliban's willingness to engage in it. But something that I want all of you to think about is the general problem within Sunni Islam as well. And within Sunni Islam, there is a complete absence of a point of reference or marja' that we call in Arabic. So for example, in Shia Islam or in Orthodox, in the Catholic faith, you have that one papacy or you have that muqtada sadr or imam that ends up becoming the supreme point of jurisprudence. So anything that they say goes. The problem with Sunni Islam as well is that a scholar down the road can basically file jurisprudence as well. So for the Taliban, they really have to attend to the more popular idea and belief. And that's, I think, brings us back to Munira's point, where a lot of what they're doing does not necessarily have to strictly be from religion. It has to appeal to the thinking of their major support base. And that thinking is purely based in Pashtun ideology. And even now with the Taliban as well, I think complete recognition as well would be problematic, but a complete absence of it or sanctions is going to create problems as well. So there is middle ground. The world has to find a way of having a working relationship with the Taliban, either through mediators or so on and so forth, but to make sure that this system or this country does not collapse, because once it goes into that vicious cycle, it coming out of it is going to take decades of good governance. Neither time is a luxury, nor that governance is a luxury right now.
Thank you, Khalid Saab, and thank you, Vedullah. We have 3 more questions I can see and about 15 minutes. So, I'm sure that this is going to be very helpful for understanding. The next question is, I'm going to read out Swad's question. And Swad is a member of our International Council, originally from Morocco. Swad, I'm just reading, Mr. Bahir said that he doesn't want Taliban to fail. what would be the criteria for Taliban's success and how far they are today from these outcomes? This is a question from Swal.
Look, when I say that I don't want the Taliban regime to fail, I mean that I don't want Afghanistan to become a failed state. That means that we're stuck in, as in the current situation in Afghanistan is a failing state to begin with. But what I mean is, with regards to success, is the economy sort of finding some sort of movement, jobs being given back, having some sort of agricultural economy back on its feet as well. So currently there's joblessness, poverty, lack of food, and basically a complete absence of basic necessities. And I think Afghans, it's not like they've enjoyed such lavish economic prosperity that they're going to ask for too much, but the current situation is not it. And the Taliban really have to get their hands, roll their sleeves up, get into their governance roles, and make sure that the economy at least has some sort of movement, and people aren't faced with a difficult decision of either being exposed to a drought or being forced to leave a country or having hunger. Look, I think the story of Ruqya here is very important as well. Ruqya is an 11-year-old girl from Mazar-e-Sharif. Her body weight is 13 kgs. She is literally in acute malnutrition and she's dying because of it. And this isn't just one child. These are thousands of children in Afghanistan. We have the largest scale of malnourishment. All of those are significant indicators that we really have to change, and we have to change them quickly for us to not be a failed state and at least have some sort of functioning economy.
Thank you. I'm going to allow Tawheedul Islam, our friend from Bangladesh, to share his question. Tawheed, floor is yours. Would you like to speak?
Okay, I think I already have his question. If
please go on. Yeah,
has problems with his mic. And the problem here is it's very difficult with the absence of actual.
Could you please hear me?
Yes, I can.
Please go on, Tawheed.
Yeah, it's okay. Thank you very much for allowing me to raise my question, please. At the beginning, it was believed by global, particularly Muslim community, that Taliban will form an inclusive government. They will follow very moderate or liberal affairs within the limits of Islam, following many modern Muslim countries. But after the removal of American soldiers or NATO soldiers, we observed that Taliban did not succeed in forming an inclusive government as it was expected by the majority Muslim community. As an expert on Afghan affairs, I just want to know from your study about Taliban, do you feel, or do you feel that there is a possibility that in near future Taliban will be an accommodative or will form an inclusive government, will be more liberal as expected by majority global community? That's my question. Thank you, please.
Thank you so much. I think that's a very important question. Look, I think it was wrong to even expect the Taliban to have any cohesive stance or structure, even when the negotiations were happening. Because like I said, that the structure of the movement was in a way where a lot of independent entities were just fighting for the same cause. That meant that when it came down to talking about setting up government, they really had to figure out a mechanism of dividing that power. That power was then divided based on a spoils of war rationale, which meant that they could not accommodate other outsiders. That meant anything and everything on offer was shared amongst the Taliban themselves. And their argument was that we preferred to work towards in-group cohesion over bringing in outsiders or satisfying international norms. Obviously, predicting the future is no absolute science, but based on the current trajectory that we have and all these different groups operating within the Taliban movement and as the government right now, they're all pulling in different directions. And that means that there is extreme lack of consolidation of authority and power, which means that simple things like girls' education. So the reason high school girls aren't going back to school isn't because that the facilities aren't available. It's basically because the Taliban amongst themselves as a central authority cannot come to an agreement on how to move forward. That means the specific provinces, the 6 provinces that have allowed girls to go back to school, have done so based on their own accord and not as a uniform group decision. And that's problematic. And secondly, even within this government structure, you have the strongest of the splinter groups being represented by their leaders within the cabinet. That means no way can you expect someday for the Taliban to turn around to someone like Mullah Umar's son or to Sirajuddin Haqqani and say, okay, your interim government is done. Now you go back. Now we're going to elect someone else in your place. The fact that these positions have been given as part of their reward system for their contribution to the war means that it cannot be taken back. That means that this system, no matter how often called an interim system, is the system that is going to stay. They're just going to find a way to achieve internal legitimacy by calling a larger scholar shura and giving backing to the state, and then they will call it the permanent state of Afghanistan. So unfortunately, there are problems amongst the group, and those are bad signs as well. The internal fighting and tension might actually end up spilling out and creating more turbulence in Afghanistan and disturbing the peace that we have achieved.
Right. So thank you. I think this will be the last question, and I'm actually combining 2 or 3 questions here. They're overlapping. The role of international community. Suad asked whether you'd see any potential difference between role of Muslim countries versus, like the Western countries when it comes to Taliban acceptability. Muin asked from Pakistan, being the immediate next door neighbor, do you see this potential from Pakistan civil society playing any role in the peace and reconciliation and social welfare which you highlighted? I think this is like, I've just clubbed 2 or 3 questions here for your response.
I think they all fall in the same line and they make a lot of sense. So the idea is, I know there is a Western approach. If it's an outsider approach, the Taliban will show more rigidity. It will cause more problems than it would solve. And then the other idea is the Afghan educated elite trying to engage in a dialogue. In the middle as well, there is the Islamic countries approach and what they can do for the Taliban. Obviously, they can help naturalize specific demands and expectations from them. So a few days ago, I think we saw foreign ministers of different Islamic countries come together and approach the Taliban to talk to them about girls' education. All of that is very helpful. With regards to the civil society in Afghanistan, I think one of the problems and the negatives of the war that happened in the past 20 years, and especially the last few years, the Afghan Republic created this narrative of showing Pakistan as the enemy, and there's an extreme turn, especially within the urban elite, of hatred towards Pakistan. And I think there has to be a lot of people-to-people contact to bridge that hate that was created in order to serve this narrative that the government was trying to put out, where the Taliban were outsiders being supported by an enemy that was Pakistan. So the civil society has to do 2 important things, especially from Pakistan. One is to have people-to-people contact with Afghans and help rejuvenate the brotherly relations that have existed between both countries. 1B, they have to really start helping out in a humanitarian way to Afghanistan, because you're the closest neighbor, you have the most convenient transportation route into Afghanistan. There are thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of refugees and internally displaced people that need your help, and civil society can help provide that. Don't solve Afghanistan's problems for it. Enable Afghans to solve their problems themselves. if that is a mantra that every country in the region starts believing in, trust me, we will have no more wars in Afghanistan for any foreseeable future. And that's a message that Iran, that China, that Russia, that any neighbor to Afghanistan really has to think about. And civil societies are the best way to approach a problem and solve it. We've had a very prosperous history together, and let's make sure that we can have that live through these turbulent times rather than ending at the other edge of the shore and then looking at each other and not recognizing who we were, right? So yeah, I hope that answers the question.
It clearly does. And I think what you said in your last remark, enabling and not trying to solve the problem, I think this is an important message for Pakistan and other countries which are trying to help the Afghan people through this crisis. I don't see other questions or any other, I think, comments from the floor. But I really want to thank you, Ubaidullah, for your time and the and depth of your analysis. I think you have addressed the situation from the ground, and we are all well informed after this conversation. And I'm pretty sure that the audience coming from different countries, have taken your message, and we hopefully will be able to, take some action within the capacities of our individuals and organizations. I also wish to thank the audience for a very, I would say, informed and engaged discussion in our first panel. And I really hope that all of you will stay throughout the conference. We'll be having 5 minutes break. I think it is recommended for even Zoom sessions to have a few minutes break away from screen, and then we're going to rejoin the conference. So you don't have to leave the log out, but you can physically move and then come back to the screen again in 5 minutes. But on these lines, again, thank you, Ubaidullah, and hope to see you in Pakistan soon in person.
Thank you. You guys have a good day, and thank you for having me.
Hello again, and welcome to our first technical session. In this session, we have two presentations. The first presentation is by Zishan Hashim, who is a doctoral researcher in economics at Brunel University, London. And he's also a fellow at Prime Institute, a think tank in Pakistan. And a second presentation after Zishan is by Azima Salim. She is also a doctoral candidate at the Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University in India. Zishan is going to speak on the topic of influence of an ideology on political and economic freedom, evidence from Muslim majority countries. Zishan, the floor is yours. You can now start.
Thanks, Ali, and thanks to the Islam and Liberty Network for organizing this event. And I'm gonna share my presentation, and then I will start discussing about my topic. So, okay, Ali, it is shared, right? On the screen you can see, okay.
Yes.
Okay, my name is Zishan Hashim, and just like Ali introduced me, I am doing PhD in Brunel University, London, and I'm also the research scholar at Prime Institute, Islamabad. And my topic of my research is the influence of religious ideology on political and economic freedom. And I'm getting the evidence from Islamic countries, especially the countries where Muslims are more than 50% of their population. And this is basically the empirical study. I'm not gonna talk about the theological arguments. I'm gonna discuss what the secular literature is explaining, means what's the relationship between democracy and free market capitalism, and also means, on the base of the evidences available, econometric evidence, and also the secular literature, means what's the important thing, whether that's the religious ideology which can shape the society, or it's the structural element in a society. And I will also discuss about means what's the needed, whether the first Muslim countries should have democracy, or it's about the free market capitalism, which can promote the political economic freedom in Muslim societies. So basically the literature which is available, which mostly covers the empirical side of it. So there is almost a consensus among researchers that there is negative relationship between Islam and democracy. And so is the relationship between Islam and economic freedom. So it means that Islam totally discouraged. And these studies which I have cited here, these have used Islam means, as a means basically they are using the dummy variable of Muslim countries. So all these studies are doing empirical research, not the theological means what basically a Quranic text or hadith say about democracy and about the economic freedom. This is what's happening in Muslim countries. So some studies are also available which shows that, the empirical studies which shows that Islam is compatible with free market capitalism, and some are saying that there's no relationship, but no study I have yet read which explain the positive relationship between Islam and democracy in Muslim majority countries. So this paper is also going to revisit these empirical evidence empirically. So the literature which explain, the secular literature which explain means how religion is important in terms of shaping the culture and economic development. This is means many authors have already written a lot about it. Basically, they're discussing about values and norms and socio-political outcome. And also they say that because religion has major contribution in shaping the values, beliefs, and norms, so that's why religion has some important role in making the societies different from each other. And similarly, the Lal study also say that because religion has the material, religion basically is about the belief system of a person, of the society. So that's why it must have an impact on the political and economic outcome. And Weber's study is very important, especially in the context of Western democracies, because Weber say that the Protestant ethics and capitalist development has positive relationship between them. And some studies are also saying that Islam is not compatible with liberal values of freedom, and it's prone to the violence, just like Huntington study and some other studies. This topic is widely discussed, and mostly the researchers say that there is something wrong with the Islamic societies, whether that's due to the Islam or whether due to some other elements. For example, structuralist view is that it's not due to the Islam, it's basically because the institution in Muslim societies are weak, and means the wealth accumulation, and there is no industrialization, and education system is poor there. And some studies just like basically discussing about the oil wealth, the studies are talking about it's due to the oil wealth, means there is no industrialization and modernization in Muslim societies. So due to that, there is no political freedom there. And also some studies are talking about discovery of oil and colonialism and some political, economic, historical, and geographical variables. So structuralist view is that it's not due to the Islam, it's due to the other factors. But some studies which say that culture is basically endogenous to the institution and economic development. So if institutions are good, so the culture would be good. And if one society is economically developed, so it means that the culture there would also be the developed. Such means they mostly provide the evidence from the Catholic societies when there were the low economic development. So Catholic were not in support of democracy, but later on when there was the development in Catholic societies, so Catholic are they are in favor of democracy and economic freedom. So they said basically culture is endogenous to economic development. And so on the base of my first chapter and what I'm doing in my PhD, it is that basically economic industrialization and diversification change the culture and also the norms, values, and all these things. And industrialization, diversification creates modernization, and it makes the society complex, open, diverse, and advanced. And the key to industrialization and diversification, the literature is widely available, which explain that the key is economic freedom. So if you have economic freedom, you can get means all these benefits, all kind of freedom you can have. So how modernization make this freedom possible? So there are three channels. One is about there would be the modernization, diversification, means the people's bargaining power against the rulers, against the state will increase. For example, if the people have more per capita income, so they will spend more on education, health, and social capital. So it means that they would be strong enough to fight against any illiberal activity from their state. And also the second mechanism is that when there is diversification and industrialization, the modern industrial elites mostly emerge and their influence expand, and especially about the Western societies, when there was a fight between modern and traditional elites. So in that situation, the democracy and free market capitalism became possible. And the third mechanism is that so middle class emerges when there is the economic freedom and there is the diversification and modernization. And due to the middle class, the pro-citizen policies also becomes possible. So the first mechanism explained about all the elite, all the citizens, and the second mechanism is about elites, and the third is about middle class. So all the literature which is available mostly discuss that the democracy and economic freedom is mainly due to the, whether that's the elite, whether that's due to the elites or that's due to the middle class or the citizens as well. So basically modernization empowers all the main pillar of society, boosting the case of economic freedom and political freedom in one society. So I'm going to discuss the empirical evidence, means what's basically means empirical studies explain about it. So my empirical method, because I use the dummy variable as Islamic country, and this is mostly in econometric studies it's available, means almost all the countries, means studies are doing Islam as the dummy variable. Means 1 means that Islam and 0 means that non-Islamic countries in the econometric analysis. And my dependent variables here are the political freedom and economic freedom, and I'm using means 2 variables for political freedom in order to measure the robustness between them. One is the polity 2 variable, and the second is the Freedom House. And for the economic freedom, I'm using 2 variables. One is the Heritage Foundation Index, and the other is the Fraser Institute. And the method means, the studies I have discussed, some studies which are showing the positive relationship, and also I'm going to discuss the empirical evidence. So in my opinion, some studies are, are facing the issue of means control variable biasness. So in order to overcome this issue, the control variable biasness, I'm using general to specific approach. And in this approach, I used around 30 variable, because I didn't want to get any result on the base of my personal biasness. I put all the variable together, 30 variables, and one by one I dropped all the insignificant variable in order to prove myself that my study is unbiased. And OLS and random effect models I used, but I'm gonna apply the fixed effect model as well, means after this presentation, because but before that I want to discuss with some expert how can I apply a fixed effect model because my independent variable is the dummy one. And then the period, it's basically covering from 1972 to 28, and all the countries in this world, they are in my sample, but some countries doesn't have the data, so that's why they are not part of it. But I will discuss how many countries are in my sample. And this is the summary statistics. I don't have much time in order to explain all of this, so that's why I'm skipping. But in my paper, which I will submit for this conference, means I will properly discuss them as well. And if anybody after the presentation needs this, I can show to him or her. And this is my first regression study, which shows that Islam has negative influence on the democracy, whether I use the Polity 2 database or whether I use the Freedom House. Both databases are showing that Islam does not support democracy. And see here, the second variable, which is not picked by me. It's basically picked by the general to specific approach. It shows that the Catholic, which were against the democracy and economic freedom, but now wherever the Catholic population is in the majority, they are in support of democracy, they are in support of economic freedom. So this is interesting. And other control variables, because I don't have enough time, I'm not going to explain them, but in my paper, these would also be discussed. And the other regression is that, so here I introduced one term. It's that, okay, if there is economic crisis in a Muslim authoritarian state, so what's the result? Whether that economic crisis can generate political freedom in that country, because the literature available explains that due to the crisis, economic reforms and political reforms happens. So if there's a crisis in Muslim state, we expect that Islam Muslim countries must go for the political freedom. But here the results indicate that either it's the crisis, or either it's not. There is no difference in terms of relationship between Islamic countries and democracy there. And then I studied, okay, so what's the relationship between Islamic countries, Islam, and the economic freedom in these countries? And there is no relationship. Again, this is, negative relationship. Islam is totally against the economic freedom according to the, you can say that regression analysis. And here I'm again saying that this is basically Islam as the countries. Now, I'm not gonna discuss theological arguments. And then, okay, I introduced, okay, if there is an economic crisis in Islamic countries, what's the outcome? It explained that, yeah, during the economic crisis, the economic reforms, economic freedom is possible. So it means that if Muslim societies are economically stable, there is no chance of economic freedom there. But if there is a crisis, then Muslim societies go for economic freedom. And this is a case recently we observed in Gulf countries as well. When there was the oil crisis, Muslim societies, moved towards the economic reforms as well. So in my paper, I will also discuss some country level studies as well. And then here I discussed, okay, if Muslim societies, adopt democracy, what would be the outcome? It explained that if Muslim societies adopt political freedom, still that discourage economic freedom. So democracy in Muslim societies is against the capitalism in Muslim society. But if Muslim societies adopt economic freedom, that can promote political freedom as well. So here it's the positive relationship. So it means that capitalism can helps Muslim societies to achieve both political freedom and economic freedom, but just democracy is not enough for them in terms of economic freedom and other kinds of freedom as well. So, this is the second part of my regression. So this regression is about democracy, and this regression is about economic freedom. So, yeah, and then I'm gonna discuss the conclusion. So the conclusion is that Islam doesn't support democracy and capitalism if the political regimes are economically stable. So if there is a stability on the basis of economic outcome, so there is no chance for democracy and capitalism on the basis of, the historical evidence from 1972 to so far. And I have studied it on the basis of statistical methodology. But if there is economic instability in Muslim societies, then Muslim societies go for capitalism, and then capitalism can promote democracy there as well. So it's the same kind of relationship if we study the history of Western civilization. In Western societies, first it was the democracy, first it was the Industrial Revolution, and due to the Industrial Revolution, the mode of production on all these things were capitalized. So capitalism basically promoted democracy in Western societies. So this is also the situation in Muslim societies. So the people who are looking for the case of freedom in Muslim societies, they should also think about capitalism, free market capitalism, in terms of the main contributing element for your democracy, for political, economic, and social freedom as well. And democratization in a Muslim society basically discourage capitalism. I have discussed that. So economic freedom, the conclusion of my study is that economic freedom is a key for in order to create the democratic society. It creates modernization effect. And I have studied how modernization basically changed the society in terms of changing values and norms. And also this is the gateway. So in my opinion, this is basically the structuralistic view, which explain that means the economic fundamentals are the key in order to shape a society. It's not just a religion. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Zishan. You can stop sharing the screen. You will come back to it. Thank you so much, Zishan. This was a very insightful presentation, and I commend you for your work. I think the way you have done the historical analysis in terms of the time, also the coverage of variables, and also coverage of the countries, all the Muslim countries, must make your study very interesting, and we all look forward to the paper which you are going to contribute. So thank you so much for undertaking this work and sharing your results with us.
And here I just want to say one thing. Sorry for that. I didn't mention in this my research. Maria Popova is also my partner in this research. She is the co-author, and she is also in this the conference. She is attending that.
Great, thank you. Thank you to your also co-author. We have. Before we move to the next presentation, I see a couple of questions here, and I think we can take those questions now. I see, Zishan, can you see a question in the Q&A box? Mohammed Bomerzak question? Or shall I ask to read this out?
Yeah, I can read it. So idea is the balance of power and influence among who insist on imposing. Is Islam really an abstract? Yeah, this question is helpful for me, but it's about the interpretation of my literature review or something like that. So I'm gonna copy it, and it will help me in writing my literature review. Yeah.
Great.
And the second one, let me read that one. Thank you. Please type your question. Okay. Yeah, that's the only one question I think.
Yeah. I'm going to now allow Tawheedul Islam to, who has raised his hand, to ask his question. Tawheed, I think you can speak. And then Amal after Tawheed. So Tawheed, please go ahead and speak. And can you please unmute yourself? We'll come back to you, Tawheed. I see Amal, our friend from Tunisia. She has raised her hand. Amal, please go ahead.
My question to the panelists is the following.
I can't hear. I think there is the internet.
Sorry, her voice is dropping out.
He says, capitalism can help divide. Hear me now? Shall I put my kit? Maybe because yes?
Yes, Amal, please go ahead.
1 minute, please.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's
sorry.
okay.
Okay. My question is the following. You mentioned the following. You said capitalism can help development.
Okay.
And it can promote democracy. And here, of course, you are bringing to us the
again, your voice has dropped.
Experience in the West, the Western countries the Industrial Revolution and the developing democratic society. And hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, no, means we can hear you, but the question we couldn't hear that.
Okay. Okay. My question is the following. You are comparing.
Amal, we can't hear you. Can you type in your question in the Q&A box and we'll come back to you.
Developing countries, and particularly the socioeconomic. Oh, you hear me now?
Yeah,
Ali?
I think your question is about why I am giving the example of Western society.
No, I haven't started. No, I haven't started my question yet. I haven't started my question yet. I'm just introducing my question.
Okay.
Ali, do you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Your voice was dropping. Please go ahead. Amal, please. Yeah.
Okay. I said to our guest that he is, of course, comparing the experience of the Western countries to the realities of the.
Instead, I mean, again, the voice is dropping. If you please write your question in the.
Okay.
Yeah, because there is one question from Nagia. Means I'm gonna answer that, and then during that time, if you write it, that would be easy for me. Yeah. So means here, Nagia is saying that okay, Islam means I totally disagree with your conclusion. Islam does not support democracy. Maybe current regime and Islamic countries don't support democracy, not Islam. Yeah, means in start I have explained that I'm not gonna give the theological arguments. I'm gonna explain what's the secular literature explaining what's the relationship between religion and the freedom, economic and political freedom, and then I use the dummy variable, that's the Islamic countries. So means on the base of the the literature available, if one society is behaving in a certain way, we can say that the religion can have influence on it. So that's why I'm saying in Muslim societies there is no democracy. And so basically in econometric studies for the Muslim societies, we use the variable means Islam, but your point is valid. So in my paper, instead of writing Islam, I will write Muslim societies as a dummy variable. So it will not create confusion about it. Thanks for this feedback. Next time in my paper, it will be Muslim societies instead of Islam. Yeah, I'm gonna copy it.
Thank you for these questions and comments. I'm now going to move to the next presentation in this session, and then we'll still have some time to come back to Zishan's presentation after that. I'm going to request Azima Salim, who is a doctoral candidate at the Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, India, JNU, and she's going to speak on the quest for reformative supranational Islamic organizations. Over to you, Azima. Can you please take the floor and share your thoughts or presentation?
Thank you so much for this presentation and for this platform, and a very good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are sitting there. So basically, I'm a doctoral candidate in Center for West Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and my doctoral thesis is I'm trying to see the problem of Syrian refugees from a theoretical perspective of global justice. So while looking from those theoretical aspects, I came across that how international organizations play a very important role in political structuring this injustice, which has been creating so much of refugee crisis. It got me an idea that we also have within the Muslim majority country a very structured organization, very structured Islamic organizations, which is basically run by the Muslim majorities. And despite of that, there's a huge human suffering in almost all the Muslim majority countries. There is a Afghanistan crisis, there is an Iraq crisis, there is a Kurdish question, there's a Shia-Sunni conflict, then Arab uprising, civil wars followed by it. There the series of events has been long, and this has actually resulted in a consistent increase in the number of refugees. So looking at to these aspects, I came across, there are few fundamental questions which raised me, which actually made me to look into this idea of reforming supranational Islamic organizations. And these questions was, what accountability these institutions have to check the violation of human rights which is happening in the region. Secondly, why they lack so much of legitimacy in the region. And thirdly, why there is so much of unsystematic accommodation. Based on these three questions, my paper tried to explore how the international organization has been playing, specifically the Islamic organization has been playing their role in these kind of sufferings, in these kind of problems. And there's not just a problem of refugees, there's a problem of growing poverty, there's a problem of health, there's a problem of civil war, also there's a problem of immigration and so forth. So looking at these aspects, I try to understand how this moral intervention of any international Islamic organization is going to help this, and what are the problems, what exactly are the problems which is making these organizations very ineffective in nature in a broader scenario. And thirdly, in how these problems can be solved and reformed into a better understanding, into a better effective manner. So I've tried to explore a different reformative approaches, which might or might not be accepted by everyone, but it's just a policy making paper which try to give an idea that these are the problems and we can solve it through that aspect. Before moving on, I'll also like to point out that there is a very sharp distinction between an international and supranational organization. When we talk about international and supranational organization, we have to be very careful how we are treating the organization, because most of the organization, the Muslim majority country. In the paper, I have tried to narrow it down to Organization of Islamic Cooperation, because this is one of the largest Muslim organization, and actually the second largest after United Nations, because it consists almost all the Muslim majority countries as its member, and it also one of the most vibrant in nature, because it has countries from all over the world, from all over the continents, from all over the culture. Despite of that, these organizations, they have structured themselves in such a manner. So I'll try, there are different organizations as well in the Muslim majority, like there is a Muslim World League, but again, that has been supported heavily by Saudi Arabia. Then there is Islamic Development Bank, that's not an organization but a part of OIC, and then there is another Islamic organization. So looking all this, and beside that there are many sub-regional organizations, which is very important when we try to look the problem in the effectiveness of these supranational organizations. The problem, first things we have to establish these, why, if I try to take the case study of OIC, why exactly it was established? It was established in order to look at the problem, especially the Jerusalem problem and the Palestine questions, to look at this problem. All the Muslim countries to come together to work on solidarity, to develop a peace, to have a common a common solution to a problem, to develop a conflict resolution. It's like dealing internally, which we have heard in the keynote in our first panelist, to deal our problem internally without taking it forward. So the main idea of OIC was established on this, and later on it was realized that the members of OIC countries are now the largest hosting refugee countries. Like in Turkey, there are around 2 million of refugees. Pakistan also hosts around 1.5 million of refugees. Iran, Ethiopia, Jordan, they also host around 650,000 approximately around refugees. And especially with the uprising and with the Syrian crisis, since my work has been specifically on Syrian crisis, so I have tried to focus that how the Syrian crisis has triggered the relevance, why the OIC or the Islamic organization was not there to deal with this such a huge issue, why it has not played a very significant role if when the people were dying out of war, out of crossing the border, out of seeking asylum, where this organization was, why it remained just a mouthpiece. So in order to understand this, first we need to understand that within OIC, there is a huge state conflict members, like the state members of for all the sort of national dialogues, but they lack mechanism in their functionings. Most of the, like I said, there is a difference between, there's a huge vibrancy within Muslim countries as well. Some are very rich, some are very poor. So these rich countries are not accommodating their refugees, but and directly or indirectly, they have been affecting the refugees. They have been, they have been they have been one of the reasons for the cause of refugees. So how, despite of the facts, they have done a huge humanitarian support, but not in the name of the supranational Islamic organizations. Whenever there is a mediation mission, like it's always the Arab League who will initiate the mission, and which is always forwarded by the OIC, which also shows that these missions are very institutionally overlapped. So this institutional overlap has to be checked, has to be discussed, and has to be understood in a manner that it is not being used by the powerful countries as their own for their personal region. Then there is a problem of a regional conflict, the power, the tussle for a regional power or regional influence in the region, like Iran, Saudi. When the Arab League of Arab States passed a resolution to suspend Syria from after the Syrian crisis, it was not taken a proper recommendation, or it was not in a consensus which was objected by the Iran, because Iran always believed in having an open space of discussion, while other states decided to suspend that Syria from its members. So this shows that there is a tussle within the organizations which is actually creating a problem in its effectiveness. That has to be dealt through the proper negotiation to sit down what exactly is beneficial for Syria, whether to suspend or to deal with the negotiations, rather than looking for their own interest or for their own influence in the region. So this is one of the regional conflicts which has been problematizing the effectiveness of the supranational Islamic organization. Besides that, the regional tussle between Saudi and Arabia has been very known, and this has been creating. Imagine if, hypothetically speaking, if those countries has been united into an aspect to work together, they might be able to develop something which is very huge without the interference of an external power, without who has been always there in the region to use for their own interest. Secondly, the role of the Arab League or the role of the GCC, they always believe in having a regional solution for the regional conflicts. They doesn't believe in going to any supranational Islamic organizations or to other organizations to deal with such issues. They feel like it is their responsibility, and beyond that, they are willing to coordinate or collaborate with the United Nations rather than collaborating with OIC. This also shows that they are also not very confident about these organizations which they have formed among themselves. So this is also show a sense of mistrust, a sense of not legitimizing the organizations which you form on yourself, and the things which you are using for your own purpose as a mouthpiece just for the regional influence, whenever you require. So the major reasons of this failure, which I have pointed out, is firstly, there has been a single hegemonic theory in the West Asia. They have always, whenever there's a crisis, it mostly turns into a proxy war or proxy conflicts, like the case of Syria, now in the case of Libya and other places. So this idea of putting their influence rather than getting the solution out of it, rather than working on a negotiations, it also a big problem. Secondly, the foreign intervention in the region. The foreign intervention in the region is also creating a problem. Suppose US has been supporting Saudi Arabia, it's been sanctioning Iran. So it is making its own space, its own way into the region for their own interests, and trying to divide the region for their own purpose. So we need to be very careful what external interventions we need and how much intervention is required for a particular aspect. Thirdly, there is no crystallized institutional structures. Like when we talk about these different institutions, these whether it's a supranational Islamic institutions like OIC or IDB, or whether it is a sub-regional institutions, there is no crystallized institutional structures. And fourthly, there is a big domestic base, because most of the states, in the Arab regions have a big state structures. Their more priority is building on states, not on a community, not on a Muslim community as a whole. So their priority is to make states, to focus on the state building, and more importantly, their own rules or their own power, their own establishment in this particular state, if in case it is an authoritarian or monarchical or military state. So this actually goes against the principles and the objectives of the OIC, which had been established. Then the most important problem, the fifth problem, is the institutional overlap. Suppose the one who is the member of Arab League is also a member of GCC, is also a member of OIC, is also, like, there are the members are the member states has been part of different institutions. So it's okay to be a part of institutions because it is the hour of need and it is required, but there should be some sort of limitations on what situation and how the situation has to be dealt. And if it has been dealing by a supranational Islamic organizations, what limitations should be there, and to what extent a state or a member state should go. The problem of institutional overlap is actually giving a convenience to the member states to use their power or use their status according to their own self-interest. The sixth problem was the weak civil society. There is or NGOs which undermine, like there is a huge violation of human rights by these organizations as well. There has been no strong speak up, strong condemnations by these organizations against the violation of human rights, whether in the case of Syrian crisis, whether in the case of other crises. So there is no civil society strong enough to function or question that why these organizations has not been accountable, has not been working up to the mark, has not been followed up by the principles. And the last reason I figured it out, that it is also because generally we fail to check the authoritarian regime. But again, this has its limitations because most of the Arab member states have or more or less authoritarian in nature. So it is something which cannot be overcome. So looking at these failures or the reasons of failures, I try to understand that there is a road, there is already a supranational Islamic organizations which can work, which has already established in itself. We just need a reformations internally, which need to work on it. And it can also be worked through the Islamic context or Islamic principles as well. Like even if we take the case of refugees, we have right to asylum, which was given in Islamic text as well. It has been discussed in Islam for a very long period of time. So we can also use that parameters. We can work on that aspects. Secondly, there has been a reformation among the states of the role of powerful. One of the very interesting thing which I found that OIC is a quite vibrant state. OIC has vibrancy of member states. So if there is a problem in one region, the member states of other region, like if there is a problem in Arab states, or if there is a problem in Syria, countries like Pakistan, who is powerful enough in OIC, country like Indonesia, who has a good say in OIC, can take a leadership role or a leadership responsibility in order to deal with that problem, because there won't be any, they have to go beyond their interest of legal and moral authorities and to deal with this problem as a moral responsibility or a leadership responsibility. And it can, it can create a space, good space or an open space for all the acceptable space for every member state, not just based on self-interest. So again, the most other important aspect is the funding aspect, because every organization has been based on some sort of funding, and the one who has been the biggest donor in the organization has more to say, has more influence in the organization. So this is also has some sort of impact on an organization. So even if there is a larger say, because even if we try to relate it with the United Nations, we are having the same problem of legitimacy with the United Nations right now also, because all its decisions are controlled and biased by the United States because one of their largest funders. So similarly, if OIC is also having a largest funder is Saudi and all its decisions are influenced by him, it has lost its legitimacy. So despite of having those donors, despite of having those fundings, one need to set the limitations on the kind of influence they give on the decision-making process. And secondly, the failure to pay their annual memberships, because there are so many member states in Muslim countries who are so poor to pay their annual membership. So they should be trained or economically developed in such a manner that they are able to pay their membership annually or regularly. Then the other aspects, the fifth aspect I figure it out is the long-term sustainability by overcoming cultural and political barriers. So what exactly are the long-term and cultural barriers? So one need to understand Muslim community is quite vibrant in nature. They are very different. So there is a problem. There was a situations where the Kuwaiti government refused to take Syrian refugees in their inside their borders, saying that they are very different culturally from us. So we cannot take them. Turkey is more culturally related to them. So this actually creates a line between a cultural divide between two different, between someone who is very hegemonic in nature. They speak same language, they speak same, but there is a cultural tussle because of this. So one need to go beyond this understanding, beyond this level of barriers, and to deal with it. The other thing is for conflict mediations. If there is any sort of conflict mediations, no single approach can work because it required a multi-approach methods. They need a consensus or an agreement by the member state. If a single member is taking, like in the case of Saudi or Kuwait, taking a decision of suspending Syria from its memberships, they should take this into consideration that it is not something, it's not the decision. It has to be taken by consensus, through consensus. It has to be taken through an agreement. Then the principle of partnerships. Coming to the principle of partnership, one of the very interesting aspects this came across when I was trying to understand the accommodation of refugees. Because if you try to see within the Muslim countries, there are only few specific countries. There is a huge chunk of refugees, and while the other doesn't take or doesn't provide any asylum status to the refugees. So why is that? So even if you have a demographic limitations, you can pay them humanitarian, just like Japan does it with the United Nations. But if you have the capability, you need to treat that with partnership. And if you cannot give them if you have a demographic limitations, you need to give a proper compensations to the countries who are hosting the refugees. Then there is the main important aspects which I find to be very effective, that these organization has to be accountable to at least its minimalistic foundation of human dignity. That is the basic anyone could expect from any organization. Like they need to respect the basic human rights every person, whether it's a refugee, whether it's a persecuted, should have. So any decision, any negotiation or any conflict resolutions which has been made should at least respect this minimum level of human dignity. Second aspects, the problem with the OIC is they always lack or they always get diverted with the right direction. So this organization should not be designed for the rich or for the rich. It should be something which is accommodating all the countries in an equitable manner, not just making someone feel very insecure about their position just because they come from a poor country, or should not be used by rich just to become for an regional influence, whether it's Saudi, whether it's Iran, whether it's any country. So it need to establish a right direction for that. And the most important is to overcome the institutional overlapping, because it always lead to a conflict of interest and competition loyalties. So one need to try to understand this double standard policies and try to limit it in the proper manner. Though there are procedural differences, there are procedural limitations or the procedural difficulties which need to take into considerations. One of the interesting things which I found, I think most of the people not agree with me, but it can also be developed by a work fund. I mean, you can develop small organizations which can develop a work fund. Looking at all these reformations, it sometimes seems very idealistic, but once you start making it philosophically or theoretically approach, it might go to an aspect, to a practical aspect as well. And despite of all these reformations, there are some sort of limitations which can create a lot of problems, like the political structure of the state. There is quite vibrant. If it doesn't get the representative of the if it is not the representation of the state of the citizens, it's difficult to give their say in an international or a supranational organization.
Azima, you have 2 minutes to conclude. I'm sorry for
It's almost there. So I just have 2 points left. The limitations is firstly the lack of state infrastructure which we have, and the second is sectarian polarizations, which is very dominant and very deep in the regions, and the third is the role of external factors, because they have been coming and making things a bit problematic. So overall, what I try to say with the paper is that we do have by we means that the people of a Muslim community do have a strong supranational Islamic organization, but we haven't given much thought, because I haven't come across who has given much scholarly thought on reforming and working on making it strong on these aspects. So one can work on it, make it much strengthened, just follow by its guidelines and principles to make it a combined Muslim community. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Azima. I think you have raised a very important issue, and thank you for addressing and analyzing this. We have about 10 minutes for question and answer. I will actually refer to first presentation, because I have seen a question which Amal was trying to raise. Zishan, can you read her question from the chat, or shall I read it for you? It's about in the chat box.
Yeah. I'm reading it, and this is totally fine. Means, she is totally right that this is the big issue. The difference between Western societies and Muslim societies is that there are no formal institutions, and also the market is totally, you can say that, monopolized or controlled by the state, and it's not free market what we are talking about. And also the distribution of power is uneven. So in that situation, it's very hard for free market capitalism to succeed. And I totally agree. And, and there is nothing in my mind or in my literature I have studied means what's the key in order to promote the free market capitalism in Muslim societies. So means, this is an open-ended question, and it's really a research question for my future studies as well. And means, it was also my point that the problem the Muslim societies are facing, it can be due to the cultural factors, but the cultural variable is not so strong if we compare it with this structural variable, just like she is talking, or I have discussed about the structural variables in my literature review section. So I totally agree with her.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Zishan. Azima, I wanted to ask you a question about the role of OIC. When I look at the charter of OIC as stated on its website, I noticed that it is very driven by the original mandate, which was conflict resolution. Especially in the context of formation of Israel and then the wars. And have you seen in your study of the organization any development in its mandate, or like let's say, not just talking about conflicts, whether it is Palestine issue or Kashmir issue or Bosnia, but generally, have you seen any evidence for more focus on developmental issues in the Muslim countries?
Not precisely. It's more or less about conflict whenever there is a conflict in the region, in the Muslim countries. So they're mostly coming out and taking out some resolution process. So, but that is also one of the issues which I have found, that they are not talking about anything economic aspect, despite of the fact that they have IDB, they have Islamic Development Bank of their own, they are funding it, which is working very well, which is funding on a good note. Despite of that, they are not taking the economic aspect, especially for the poor Muslim majority countries, in that rigorous manner. I haven't seen any economic development till now in their approach, and I think it can be a very good way to lead this idea of cooperation, and the way to develop a consensus, a way to develop a Muslim community, if they start concrete projects rather than focusing on their own aspects. These are mostly in the context of OIC, no. But if you go to other sub-regional organizations, yes, there are some sort of economic agreements or economic development that has been going on. But OIC has more or less restricted itself to the conflict resolution itself, despite of the fact that its charter says extensively on all other aspects as well. Like it talks about social aspects, it talks about cultural aspects, it talks about developing a solidarity among the Muslim states, but it doesn't talk. It hasn't done much in practice. The problem is that they have so many good words on the charter, but the thing is, it is not visible or evident in the reality. So, yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. We are moving to the close of this session. I don't see any other questions or comments on this particular debate. I'm just waiting if anyone wants to raise hand or contribute. Yeah. What I noticed in both presentations, both Zishan and Azima's presentation, is let's say when they were moving towards recommendation, both of them mentioned about the economic freedom or economic development as the gateway. And for me, it's interesting that Zishan is coming from a historical academic angle, and Azima is talking about the role of supranational organization. But in a way, both of the speakers are actually pointing into the same direction. It is the economy which matters. That's of course my conclusion. Let me refer to one of the questions here. I see a raised hand, so I'm going to let Nagia or Najia. I'm sorry, I can't. Please introduce yourself. Now, floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much. I'm Nadia Said from Egypt, and I was wondering, why do we have to choose capitalism for the free market as the best solution? In our experience in Egypt, many years ago, we were talking of Islam and the roots of Arab socialism, not Marxism, but Arab socialism. And I don't know if you are familiar with that or not. Actually, my late father was an Arab socialist and an Islamic scholar, and he wrote a very important book in English, published by Blanford Press, called Arab Socialism in the 70s, and it was translated to many languages like Swahili and so on. And I'm just wondering, why do we have to follow capitalism and free market economy, or Marxism and other ideologies? Why not in our Islamic heritage and culture and find our own economic system, which is compatible with our principles and values?
Ali, can I answer this question?
Yes, sure.
Yes, Amin, please go ahead.
Yes, certainly. The reason why I talk about capitalism, I don't want to put words in the mouth of my colleagues, is because capitalism is the economic model that produces the greatest well-being for people as a whole. Socialism, everywhere it's tried, fails and leads to tyranny and impoverishment. The best societies in the world today are the liberal democracies of places like Scandinavia, Western Europe, and to a slightly lesser extent, the United States, because they don't have enough of the protections that the state can bring. But the social democracies of places like Sweden and Denmark and the United Kingdom and Germany, they are social, but they are capitalist. They are fundamentally capitalist societies. And secondly, Muslims should be proud of the fact that capitalism came from ideas that developed in Muslim majority world. There's a book I want to recommend by Benedict Kohler about Islam and the rise of capitalism. I can't remember its exact title. Ali can put it into the information afterwards, but it's Benedict Kohler is the author. So that is why I talk about capitalism. And Gamal Abdel Nasser, when he talked about Arab socialism, was simply like the Pied Piper of Hamelin, leading people into a mass delusion.
Yeah, if I want to add something more, for me, it's the link between capitalism, or we can say that the economic freedom and prosperity is a secondary thing. But for me, the first thing is that the freedom is for a human soul. It's like the food. So it's first the question of freedom and unfreedom. So if you are gonna choose the freedom, you need to have economic freedom, political freedom, social freedom. And if you are not gonna choose freedom, then any type of the regime you can influence. And also you are saying that means why don't we have Islam? I'm not saying that you should or you should not have, but the question would also be like that, whether going for Islam, choosing Islam, does it encourage political, economic, and social freedom or not? Because that's the basic value the human society needs. Every human soul needs the freedom. And the second thing, just like Muhammad Amin said, there is a positive relationship between the economic freedom and prosperity. Recently, one paper published that paper is concluding all the studies on the economic freedom. It's around more than 500 studies, the good robust studies, and it concludes that there is no even single variable relevant to the prosperity which has negative relationship with economic freedom. So economic freedom is promoting all kind of prosperity variable in our society. So that's why we need it. And the third thing is that the Scandinavian society, if we look at the economic freedom index, we will find that even Scandinavian countries are not socialist in terms, because their economic freedom is so high that even you can compare with the USA. Some Scandinavian countries has less taxation than USA, and some Scandinavian countries has more economic freedom than you can say that than USA. And also there's just the discussion about income distribution by Scandinavian countries, and USA does not have. So Hayek book and many books also explain that if there is no market interferences and government is providing income support to the people, that's not against economic freedom. So it's a good discussion, but whether Muslim societies need it or not. But whenever I will need to choose anything, I will choose freedom, whether that has the positive influence on my prosperity or not, because freedom, I need it in order to live.
Thank you so much, Zishan. I've also put in, I think Özlem actually put in the name of the book in the chat box. So that book by Benedict Kohler can be studied. This is worth a read. And my apologies for a little bit of self-promotion. I also put the name of my own book here on Islam and economics, which was published this year by Acton Institute, which sort of answers to your question, Nagia. it doesn't compare as such capitalism and socialism, but it tries to portray the economic organization system, which early Islamic history we have seen. But I wanted to conclude the session now, and I want to thank both Azima and Zishan for leading very informed and well-researched discussions. And I congratulate both of you, and I hope to looking forward to papers, which will be then be able to publish for broad audience. Thank you, Amin, also for your intervention here, which was very helpful. We are going to now move to the next panel, but again, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can I confirm our both speakers are here, Shamsul Asri and Ali Hasniya?
I'm here. Right. Can you hear me?
Yes, I'm just going to.
Okay.
Yeah, just allow me a second, please.
Okay.
Right, so I'm going to move to the next session now. I've made both Dr. Ali Hassania and also Shamsul Asri co-hosts, so they can share their videos on their turn. The first presentation is by Shamsul Asri, who is an assistant professor at International Studies Department, Fajar University in Indonesia. It's very late there in Indonesia, I believe. So thank you so much, Shamsul Asri, for joining. The topic of the presentation is Urban Walk, Engaging Religious Harmony, Cultivating Religious Freedom. So I'm now over to you, Dr. Shamsul Asri. Seems that we have lost him. He was there in the panel. Let me bring him back here. Can I request Ali Hasniya to start instead? I believe that he will join back. Shamsul Asri, are you there? Sorry, I see you now back.
Yes, dear Ali, I'm here.
All right. Can you share your video, please?
Okay. I cannot start my video because. Okay, right now.
Yeah, now you can.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome. Please go ahead. Floor is yours.
Okay, thank you. Please let me share my screen. Okay, I hope you can see my screen now.
Yes, we can.
Yes, thank you very much, dear Ali and the ILN committee for this opportunity. My name is Samsul Asri, assistant professor at Fajar University.
Your screen is wobbling, Shamsul Asri. Your screen is not stable.
My screen is not stable. Okay.
Yes,
How about now? Can you see it?
No, it's moving. It's now it's better. It's very unstable. It's keep on changing the tab or this. It's not. Yeah.
How about now? It is still moving.
Yeah, still moving.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. How can I fix it? Yeah.
I think it must be a local.
Yeah.
One technical help is please maximize it. If there is a tip from our friend Iftikhar, saying please maximize your presentation screen. This one, yeah. Let's do it. Yeah.
Oh, maximize it. Okay. 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 Let's do it. Let's do it. Like here.
No. Yes, it's now. Oops, I'm sorry.
Do you see it now?
I saw it for a minute and then it's gone.
Okay.
Yes. Could you also try with your only audio? You can switch off your video and then share the screen still. Does that help? Is just a. Or otherwise, just if you can speak without the presentation, if it's all right. I mean, yes. The presentation would be on your laptop and you can just speak.
Okay, okay. Thank you very much. Let me start, yeah.
And you can then you have to stop the sharing of screen, please.
Okay, okay, okay. I understand. Let's do that. Okay.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Please go ahead. Yeah.
Okay. So my title is Arba'in Walk. It's engaging religious harmony and cultivating religious freedom at the Shrinescape. So there is a popular meme in the internet that portray that Arba'in Walks is about 20 million people attending in Arba'in, a Shi'i religious ceremony for Imam Hussein. The pilgrims are said to come from over 60 countries, and most of them march all the way to Karbala from other Iraqi cities in a show of devotion. They don't think of food or shelter, as free food and shelter is offered by local people all the way along. This is the popular meme I found on internet, but what is not portrayed by this meme is that not only Shi'i
I'm sorry, Shamsul, we have lost you. It looks like Shamsul is having some technical problems and he had maybe internet issues over there. I'm going to wait for 1 minute and then I'm going to see if he comes back. 1 minute. All right, maybe we'll have him back hopefully during this session. Ali Hasnia, are you listening? Can you start your presentation, and we'll come back to Shamsul after yours. Great. Thank you, Ali. And Ali Hasnia is here with us now. He's a professor at the Department of thank you, professor at the Department of Quran and Hadith Studies at Shahid University in Iran. And he's going to read, share his presentation is on religious violence to social solidarity, the need for new interpretations of Islamic text. Floor is yours, Dr. Ali.
Yeah, thank you. Just wanted to share my presentation. Can you see my presentation? Is it okay?
I can see the presentation slide. It's coming out very slow, and your voice is also dropping.
Can you hear me? The
Yes.
sound is okay?
A bit slow, but we can hear you.
Oh, okay. Why? It's okay now? It's okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
can you,
just let me.
Ali, your bandwidth is
Now
very
it's
low.
okay?
Ali, your bandwidth is very low. Can you switch
The
to
sound
audio?
is better now?
Can you switch to audio and then speak?
Sound, can you hear me or not?
I think, Dr. Ali, you should switch off your camera and then speak.
Yeah.
Please go ahead.
Yeah.
Hopefully it will help.
Okay. It's okay now? The sound is better?
It's better. I can hear these words.
Yeah. Okay, it's okay now? It's better? The sound is better now?
Yeah, yes, sound is better.
Yes?
You should start, yeah.
Yes, I'm speaking now. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? The sound is okay? It's fine? I don't know why. Just
Ali
it's
Hasnia
okay now. Here sound is okay. I don't know why.
Ali Hasnia, please
Hear
go ahead.
me?
Please go ahead and make your presentation.
It's okay now? It's better
okay.
sound?
It's okay. Please start your presentation.
It's better. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Mr. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, yes, please go ahead.
Just a minute to use maybe microphone. Yeah, it's okay now. Can you hear me? Yeah. If my sound is okay now or not?
Yes, okay.
Okay. Yeah. And shall I open my video?
I think you should continue with audio.
My camera, shall I open or not?
No.
Just please. It's okay now? Sound is better? I don't know what happened. Mr. Ali, can you hear me? It's okay. Okay. So, in the name of God, most compassionate, most merciful, thanks a lot. Okay. I don't know why, but the internet maybe is weak here. Okay. Thanks a lot, Mr. Ali and Ali Salmon and other managers of this conference for the Asian Islam and Liberty Conference.
All right, friends, it seems that we have lost both our speakers due to the internet issues. I'm going to request that I saw some, hands raised while they were going to come back. Maybe we can continue our discussion. I've advised them to use audio. But for Ali Hasnia, he's in Iran and he's not able to access Zoom directly. So he has to use VPN. I guess that is causing a problem. Nagia, you wanted to say something? I see your hand raised.
Okay, thank you. I just want to say that in Egypt, we suffered both ways during Nasser's time and during Sadat and during Mubarak. It is a continuous process of suffering and experimenting, unfortunately, from one extreme to the other. It's like, when you have a Pyrex in the freezer, and all of a sudden you get it out and put it in the oven, it just blows up and cracks. So somehow we need to find the middle way, and which is rooted in Islam. And I'm not at all against freedom, personal freedom. It's just that there should be some mechanisms for controls that guarantee the public good. That's all what I wanted to say.
Thank you, Nagia. We have got our speaker back, Shamsul. I'm glad that you are back. We're having some technical issues with also other speakers. So Shamsul, please go ahead with your speech or presentation.
Okay.
Do not share the screen though. You can just continue.
Okay, thank you very much. Please, if you lost me again, please just tell me, or I will reach out of you. So, okay, Arba'in Walk is an annual commemoration of Imam Hussein's 40th day of martyrdom, done by walking mainly from Najaf to Karbala. Global Husseini means lover of Imam Hussein's, affected and affected by Karbala event coming from around the globe, from multi-religious and faith adherents. So this study is about these subjectivities, these people who are not Shi'i, not Muslim, who coming to Karbala annually around 20 Safar in Islamic calendar every year. Okay. Husseini means an individual who inspired and being transformed in actu by the principles, cause, purpose, and suffering of Imam Hussein in Karbala. The questions arise: why this Christian, Hindu, Kejawen, and Buddhists coming to Karbala annually everywhere. They are tiny in number, but the question remains, why do they come to Karbala annually? So therefore, I delve into this question and come up with, there are already seeds of global Husseini. For example, there is Husseini Brahmin, a crossover faith between popular Islam and popular Hinduism in India. They are now a majority Mohyal family. Sanjay Dutt is one of their example. There also Wahab al-Kalb, a Christian soldier who present at Karbala and fought alongside Imam Hussein against Yazid army. There's also Christian priests who want to buy Imam Hussein's head after being cut off and stick to the lens, but the soldier of Yazid refused to sell Imam Hussein head. Therefore, the Christian priest only rent it for one night. Therefore, he shore the head with perfume and place it in the sacred place in his church. Of course, Husseini Brahmin or Wahab al-Kalb or Christian priest is not historical fact. It is narrative fact. The difference between historical and narrative is that even though historically we do not find Husseini Brahmin or Wahab al-Kalb or Christian priest traces in materiality, but they are living in the imagination of from Balkan to Bengal complex surrounding the main narrative of Imam Hussein. And what is more important that there is parade of Labbaika Ya Hussein testimonies narratively scattered around the world for over 14th century, from Che Guevara to Nelson Mandela, from Sukarno to Mahatma Gandhi, for example. So this layer of testimony about Imam Hussein's struggle, Imam Hussein's suffering, Imam Hussein messages come to form this enthusiasm to become present in Karbala annually by these non-Shi'i and non-Muslim alike. Okay, I hope I can still have time. My finding about this presence of non-Muslim and non-Shi'i in Karbala, I see them as engaging religious harmony and cultivating religious freedom. There are conflicting reading from Shi'i scholarly researching about the nature of Imam Hussein messages. So in one hand, there are tendency to read that Imam Hussein belongs only to Shi'i worldview, to Shi'i epistemology and ontology and axiology, but there are also readings, for example, from Hamid Dabasi, who saw that Imam Hussein's suffering belongs to humanity. Even one of the most respected scholar in Shi'i milieu, such as the almarhum Ayatollah Bahjat, who said that in Shi'i the 12 Imam undergone two occultation, minor occultation and major occultation, and when he reappearance, the 12 Imam also undergone two reappearance, minor reappearance and major reappearance. Major reappearance when he will come up, and the minor appearance is happening right now when Imam Hussein messages is accepted by all of the people of the faith who come to commemorate his message in Karbala annually. And Imam Zaman, or the 12th Imam, will pronounce that this is Hussein, my grandfather. So the conflictual nature of reading the Karbala is already there. But I want to push forward to say that the presence of non-Shi'i and non-Muslim alike in Karbala they are actually engaging religious harmony and cultivating religious freedom. There is tendency to see that these people of non-Shi'i and non-Muslim eventually will be Shiiticized in the larger process of Arba'in Walk. But I think that is not the case, since they are coming there as genuine Christian. They are coming there as genuine Hindu or genuine Kejawen. Kejawen is local practice here in Indonesia, in Javanese island. They are see in Imam Hussein persona and embrace Imam Hussein message. Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Ali?
Yes, please carry on.
Okay. They are coming to Karbala everywhere, not in order to surrender to become Muslim or
Well, it seems that we have lost our speaker once again. So I see Ali Hasnia back in the panel.
Yeah, can you hear me? The voice is okay now?
Yes, please. We can hear you.
Yeah, I don't know why and what happened here. Maybe because I'm using VPN here. But just try to share my screen. And can I start or not?
Ali, please wait. Ali, please wait. Shamsul is still speaking. Shamsul, please continue.
Yes, I think I have delivered my main argument, so I will giving back the forum for you, Ali Salman. I'm afraid I am making the forum is quite uncomfortable. So I have already delivered my argument, and I hope there is a good session of question and answer. Thank you, Ali Salman.
Thank you so much, Shamsul. Now, I'm pleased that despite technological challenges, you were able to deliver your point, and the way you analyze the Arba'in Walk tradition, the Shia tradition, and how it brings together people from various religious background while maintaining their own religious beliefs and religious identity is a symbol of religious harmony. Which is the point you have made, certainly a point worth emphasis, and we will look forward to your paper on the same. We have our other speaker, and we'll come back to you, Shamsul. Ali Hasnia, I hope that you can now continue with your presentation, but maybe you don't have to switch on your camera if it helps.
Okay, can you hear me? The sound is okay now?
Yes, sounds is much better. Please go and carry on.
Okay, sorry, because of some problems here. And I don't know what happened, but I would like to hear the presentation of Brother Asri, because the Arba'in walking is so interesting topic, I think. And thanks a lot, Sheikh Ali Salman, because for inviting me to this conference. I met you in the last two conferences in Indonesia and Pakistan, and thanks a lot for this invitation. I would like to have a good presentation here. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. My presentation is about how we can have a new interpretation of Islamic text, from religious violence to social solidarity. I seek to show how diverse interpretations of religious texts, especially holy texts like the Quran, may conclude an extremist violent thought or vice versa, a modern developed thought based on solidarity, stability, prosperity, and integral relations between members of a society. I will discuss and answer the questions. The questions are how a new interpretation will theoretically and practically change an unpleasant concept, for example, religious violence, to a desirably necessary one, solidarity and social solidarity. And what is the role of modern reading or new reading of the Islamic text in providing a well-being community? Let's start to define the word solidarity and social solidarity. I think social solidarity means unity of purpose, interest, or sympathy as of a group or class that produces or is based on community of interest, objectives, and standards. Technically, it is defined as the perceived or realized organization of individuals for group survival interests or purposes may result from either external threats or internal needs. This term is basically applied in sociology and the other social sciences, as well as in philosophy and bioethics, although it is not defined clearly. According to Durkheim, in a society exhibiting mechanical solidarity, its cohesion and integration comes from the homogeneity of individuals. People feel connected through similar work, educational and religious training, and lifestyle. So the next definition is related to religious solidarity and the connection between religion and solidarity. As for the role of religion in solidarity, religions display an affinity with solidarity. The history of religion illustrates a wide variety of relationship between religious ideas and solidarity interests, be it as a motive, as an aim, or as an effect. Generally, socialists differ in the role and importance of religion in social and individual senses. For example, fundamentalists like Durkheim, Max Weber, Parsons, and others emphasize the positive role of religion, while others like Karl Marx, Zomner, and Gillen believe in the negative role of religion. This group, I mean the latter group, even say that religion is dysfunctional and sometimes will be a pretext for violence operations by its followers. Religious and other cultural institutions provide, encourage, and to a great extent require vision and visionary leaders that serve to express institutional-wide ideas, values, and purpose, which not only transcend the everyday events and issues of its members, but also give members a sense of collective identity, thus encouraging solidarity. Collectively, when within religions and cultural institutions, the ceremonial, those life events that are commemorated, and visions and visionary leaders provide the organizational glow that accounts for solidifying events. So let's talk about religious violence here, and it's got about it. If you can see my diagram, religious violence is a term that covers a phenomena where religion is either the subject or the object of violence behavior. In other words, it has two following meanings, which should not be interpolated. A type of violence committed by a person, group, or institution with a religious identity. And the second one is a type of violence legitimatized and sanctions but by religion itself. In the sense, religious violence is not just a kind of violence that is committed by religious agents, but it is justified and or motivated by religious teachings. So the purpose of religious violence in both definitions is to defend the religion itself, and maybe in political sense to defend political interests and economical interests, for example, or personal interests. Three words are seen common in both meanings: religion, committer, and violence. Both definitions emphasize the act of violence by the followers, the latter basically through the religious principles and context, and the former through the committer's own understanding or interest of religion. Accordingly, the base of violent thoughts, behaviors, and deeds is either the religion itself or the committer attacker. Since all religions, especially when speaking of major religions like Islam, Judaism, and Christianity, have their own textual doctrinal precepts, the main common value of religion and followers is the text. In fact, what is basically so important to justify behaviors is the pretext. I mean, the religious text. When we talk about the pretext in religious violence, we cannot neglect the text on which the committers base their thought. So, going back and reformulating the research questions, now we should ask if the text is the main common value between religion and followers, why some believers do violent behaviors by the name of their beliefs, and why do they use religion as the basis of violence? So one may simply reply that since the religious prescriptions inside violent behaviors, so the believers follow what has been said in their theological creed, inferring from the religious text. From a social point of view or a psychological trend, primarily this answer may be correct, but it is so superficial. I think if it is correct, we should ask why there are different views on the issue of violence in a religion, such as, for example, fundamentalism, Salafism, jihadism, rationalism, modernism, esotericism, and etc. The answer should be placed, I think, according to my study and according to this study, the answer should be placed on the issue of reading a religious text methodologically, I think. In other words, what is happening by the name of religion, I mean, violence is not because the very religion prescribes it, but because of the way of reading its text by readers or believers. Different ways of readings throughout the history of a religion concluded different understandings. Then what should be examined is to detect how a religious group read its text in this regard. In my study, I found two major ideas that may be concerned to religious violence. Some studies connect the issue of religious violence to the issue of textual or nas or literalism. We can call them literalism and esoteric tendencies of understanding religious texts. Accordingly, in the history of interpreting religious texts generally and methodologically, two main approaches have been applied by believers so far. One is tafsir and ta'awil. I mean the methodological interpretation of religious texts in order to reach the proper meaning hidden under the apparent text, maybe translated as purposivism. And the second one is nas or zahir. I mean the literal interpretation of religious texts in order to be faithful to the apparent meaning, and an apparent text may be translated as literalism or textualism. The believers of ta'wil and tafsir purposivism say that any text has two layers of apparent, zahir, and hidden, batin. The apparent layer is the same, a literal translation of the text, and the hidden layer can only be reached through a methodological interpretation. In contrast, according to textualists, if we consider to the exoteric meaning of the text, we will stay true to the text, and so the meaning of the sacred text will be clear. The origin of this method would coincide with the birth of the oldest holy text. Along the history, it has been changed to other theological schools and to the modern concept of fundamentalism. That is characterized by a markedly strict literalism, textualism. Although this concept is used today more political than its religious usage, the origin of religious extremism may mostly be traced to the fundamentalist or fundamental approaches in religion. The manifestation of extremist beliefs is sometimes violent behaviors under the name of religion. Another group of studies connect this issue of religious violence to the problem of historical and hermeneutical approaches to religious texts, whose common purpose is to show the religion itself is the cause of violence by providing the believers with reasons for committing such violence. So I slept this slide, and you can see how these two ideas say that violence is incited by religion or religious text itself. So I wanted to connect and discuss about religious violence or social solidarity. Again, going back to the questions, here it should be emphasized that although all of these methods are applicable in interpreting or religious texts, since in many cases the result of interpretation contradicts what we know and what expect of the pure nature of religion, as well as the reality of human life as a divine nature, it seems they must be reviewed again. According to the study, if we desire to reach the core meaning of a religious text, today we need a new understanding of religion, understanding from which not only violence is not inferred, but also pacifism, prosperity, and solidarity is prescribed instead. A rereading of the religious text is necessary to adapt the religious concepts to rational and the real world of today human. This new reading may be referred to as the new hermeneutics or modern hermeneutics, but based on the definition and theories of hermeneutics, and many methods have been changed during the history of hermeneutics. These titles, I think, also maybe may not convey a proper name. So I call it new interpretation or new reading or rereading. Okay. I wanted to show how a new interpretation will change. So to show this theory, I wanna to give you a very tangible example to show how a new interpretation will change a very invidious term of violence to a very valuable concept of solidarity in Islam. The Quranic phrase "Ashidda'u ala al-kuffar ruhama'u baynahum" in Surah Al-Fat, verse 29, is studied here as a case. The general interpretation of the verse is that the companions of the Prophet should treat each other in kindness and deal with disbelievers in anger. They are kind with their friends and hard-hearted, fighter and harsh with enemies. Sunni and Shia interprets, they interpret generally state that according to this verse, believers are defined as being harsh and violent towards the infidels and enemies. Even those who focus on the literal and grammatical structure of the text interpret this phrase as the highest level of harshness in fighting and spreading hate and enmity to infidels. In addition, even the contemporary commentators considered its harshness and severe facing with infidels. So I don't want to bring you all of these documents because time is maybe is going to over, but I wanted to say that such statements incite a big distance between believers and infidels in the field of social relations, which can be a good ground for prescribing violence in society, especially when believers refer to Muslims and infidels to others. There are undoubtedly ideological boundaries between believers and infidels, but ideological boundaries also mean behavioral boundaries. And the Holy Quran consider harshness, strictness, lack of mercy, and lack of compassion with infidels as a behavioral principle. I studied this phrase, I mean, Ashidda'u ala al-kuffar, to find the proper and real meaning of this phrase. I studied it in both textual based inquiry and historical based inquiry. According to my study that I want to discuss all of them, according to lexicographers and commentators, this word means strength and firm stability of believers against enemies, not violence and hard-hearted against infidels. If you can see this diagram, according to this study, I found that ashadda does not mean violence and harshness against others, especially infidels and enemies, but it means vice versa, and in contrast, it means to have inner firm stability, inner strength, be impenetrable against enemies, and be kindness and friendship inside the society and between ourselves, or be brother, be kind with each other. So it doesn't mean violence, but also it means a social solidarity and integration, a very good integration inside the society. Maybe if we wanted to, we wanted to support this idea, we can exemplify it of the phrase or of the word ummah in the Quran. The ummah is a very important and a key word in the Quran that according to my study, ummah in the Quran means all of the community in the Muslim world. It doesn't mean that only Muslims, but includes all members of this community, maybe Jews, maybe Christians, maybe pagans and other people inside the community, community. In this way, all individuals have a common goal and try to reach a social cohesion, integration, and solidarity. In other words, religion is the deepest, I think, truest and most enduring thing leading to internal social solidarity. Another example maybe goes back to the biographical study of Muhammad, Prophet Muhammad, and also maybe all of these historical evidences can support this idea. Therefore, I think maybe Islam, if I conclude my study according to studying the phrase ashadda and ummah, and maybe other phrases like, for example, tolerance that I delivered another presentation in the last conference in Indonesia, I think violence is not as a result of the prescriptions of a religion, but is dependent on the way of reading its text by readers. Then what should be examined is to detect how a religious group read a religious text. The different methods are applicable in interpreting a religious text, since in many cases the result of interpretation contradicts what we know and what we expect of the pure nature of religion, as well as the reality of human life as a divine nature. It seems they must be reviewed again. If we desire to reach the core meaning of a religious text, today we need a new understanding of religion, an understanding from which not only violence is not inferred, but also pacifism and prosperity and solidarity is prescribed instead. So, can you hear me?
Yes, okay? we have to close now. Ali Hasni, can you conclude, please?
Okay, I conclude. So, for example, concerning the Quranic phrase, of literal and historical proves that it means solidarity, integration, and firmness in Islamic society, not harshness and cruelty as most scholars said. The Quranic word ummah also shows that a religion can collect billions of people and guide them towards a single goal according to divine teachings. In this way, all individuals have a common goal. So Islam is the religion, is the last statement. Islam is the religion of mercy, peace, kindness, and friendship. How can one attribute violence to this religion just only because he or she interprets a single verse without a thorough look at the Quran and supporting indicators? Therefore, as showed, if religious texts, especially in problematical cases, are reread, some very hateful and anti-human rights phrases like religious violence will be changed to very pleasant and prospering concept like social solidarity. Sorry, that's it.
Thank you so much, Ali Hasnia. Can you, yeah, thank you. You can close this screen, stop sharing.
Yeah, okay. I'm trying now. Because it's the first time I use Zoom here. Sorry.
No problem. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ali Hassania. I think you delivered a very important presentation on the importance of reinterpretation of religious text, and the way you have shared some practical examples is quite helpful. And we all look forward to the paper on the basis of this presentation. We have, since we lost some time in the technological issues, maybe we can take 5 minutes, but not more than 5 minutes to have some quick comments or question answers for our speakers, Shamsul and Ali Hassania. If there are any comments or questions, please let me know, otherwise we can conclude also.
Dr. Ali Salman, may I have a question?
Please.
Yeah, sorry, because no one has any questions. So I wanted to ask a question about Arba'in gathering and about Arba'in walk from Mr. Asri. I don't know, he can hear us or not?
Yes,
I can hear. I can hear you. Please.
Okay, okay. Brother Asri, you had a very good presentation about Arba'in and a big or a word Husseiniya in this walking. Could you please tell me that Arba'in, you think that is a rational gathering, or no, it is only an emotional gathering? I mean, could you please differentiate between rational senses and emotional senses in Arba'in? And have you seen Arba'in yourself or not? Arba'in gathering, sorry.
Thank you. I am not yet attended the Arba'in. In 2019, my visa is rejected because my agent is not sufficiently stated that I am a researcher and not a pilgrim. So therefore, my visa in 2 years ago is being rejected. So my methodology in this research is ethnography. Ethnography is digital ethnography. We are conducting deep interview with a participant via internet, via online. We are study the primary sources via tele researching, that we are using internet as the main channel, as the main facilitator of this research. It's quite established as a method. It's called ethnography.
His question about being, you see it, is it rational or emotional? Can
Yes,
you answer that?
yes. I cannot separate where is the line separating the rational and the emotional, where emotional ends and rational begins, or where the rationality ends and the emotivism begins. But I see that in Arba'in Walk, great effort must be made in order to be able to conduct the hard and long journey, and it is impossible with only rationality. It must be demanded as emotionality also, but rationality in itself is required in order to see that this movement or this pilgrimage, or I rather say this inter-religious pilgrimage, has a purpose, has an ethics, calling for justice, for example, calling for developing universal semantics, universal language, to be able to stand in front of predatory power, for example. So yes, Ali Hassanian, there is both emotional and rational there, and the separating line is very blurring, to say so.
Thank you, Shamsul. We have 2 participants, and I will request them to share their questions quickly so that we can conclude the presentations. Moin, would you like to ask your question?
Sure. I'd be happy to ask it. So let me just, okay, I can just ask it. I don't have it in front of me. So, usually we think of religion as being the source of the guidance, and look for guidance and look for instructions as to how to live our lives. If we take external concepts such as solidarity, such as pacifism, and then try to find support from within religious texts such as the Quran, to support that, then aren't we hijacking the religion? Aren't we trying to, we have some agenda and we are trying to get support from the religion for that agenda? I mean, isn't there a risk that we do that we end up doing that?
All right, thank you. I think I let Ali Hasni answer that, but before Ali, let's take one last question from Afaf.
Okay.
Afaf, you can speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to highlight something, and that is that, when we talk about hadith, which are about the Prophet and his sayings and his doings, we always say an. We give references, which is something now we know as very advanced. But again, in the Quran, there has been no adequate studies to not to reference, but to say the setting or the context in which any ayah has been written. So like, for example, if we say disbelievers, which disbelievers? And the word ashidda, it actually doesn't mean violence as much as it means strong, and stay strong, don't get weak with them, but with which disbelievers? Because it is also, we are asked in our religion that we shouldn't harm anybody who is a disbeliever with, for example, God saying, in Allah yahdi man yasha, and that we, bab al-tawbah maftuh, in there is always the gate of forgiveness is open. That means you shouldn't be so aggressive at all with anybody, because you may never know tomorrow he's a believer. So I just wanted to highlight this point. Like we say that a special sect is God's chosen people. Well, that doesn't go even if they do harm. They are chosen because they were good at that point.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for
thank you. And last question, Iftikhar Bazmi, can you say your question, please? And then we refer to our panelist.
Thank you, Ali Salam Bhai, participants, and it was a very nice discussions. I would like to just give you one view that, as far as the Arabian is concerned, it is always said that only the Shias, they are participating in the Arabian, and because they are just commemorating the martyrdom of Imam Hussein and his companions. But it is not like that. All the Muslims, they follow the preaching of Prophet Muhammad Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and Imam Hussein is the grandson of Prophet Muhammad. So it is the duty of everyone just to preach the humanity. And Arba'in is the only example in the world where all type of religion, irrespective of their sex and anything, they never ask anyone who you are, where from you have been. And I think this is the only message which is the need of the day, to spread all over the world, just to have a communal harmony. And I am highly thankful to the participants who have delivered a marvelous lecture. Thank you.
Thank you, Iftikhar. Can I request both Shamsul and Ali Hasniya to quickly respond to these points, and then we will conclude the conference.
Yeah, may I answer? Oh,
Ali Hasniya,
okay.
please.
Yeah, okay. Regarding Moin's question, that's, yes, that's a very good question. He says that's it says that religion is the source. We cannot maybe connect some social concepts like solidarity to religion, and maybe it is a case of hijacking religion. You know, the problem today is that some fundamentalists and some extremist group, they use religion and they use religious texts to support and maybe to use it for some actions in their lives, especially when we're speaking about violence in a society. For example, now we see that some extremist group, they use the words of the Quran and the Quranic verses, and they say that, okay, now we can go and go through and maybe attack to infidels, to other countries, to other nations, and use these verses. So the problem is that they use it, and maybe all people who read these religious texts, they wanted to use it in their social life. We cannot separate between our personal life and social life. We live in a society, so we need to have a good and correct and proper interpretation of our religion. And we know that most of the people in the world, they have one religion, for example, Christian, Jewish, or maybe they are Muslims. So we need to have a good and very, very new interpretation of religion, so we cannot use it as violence and violent behaviors against others. Sorry. Thanks.
Thank you. Shamsul?
Yes, thank you, Iftikhar, for your very good observation. I would like to agree with you that it is about the universal calling of Imam Hussein message to all of humanity. But I also have to state that it is only half of the coin. In religious studies perspective, there's not only communitas or solidarity involving all the participants of the Arba'in Walk, for example, but there's also conflicting narrative, and there's also a contradictory standpoint in perceiving who is Imam Hussein and etc. For example, there's a growing concern, as my study find, there's a growing concern channeling or hijacking the Arba'in Walk in the sense that there's a attempt to channel Arba'in Walk and global attention for Arba'in Walk into conflicting narrative between Iranian Ayatollah Khamenei and Iranian and Iraqi Ali Sistani. For example, the Mawaqib builders providing hospitality, there is a conflicting standpoint, channeling the national politics of Iranian and Iraqian in one side, and that penetrating into the body of hospitality being practiced in Arba'in Walk. Of course, Iftikhar, I would like to agree with you that Imam Hussein message is universal and could be read as humanity's own, but the data in the field suggests a more nuanced and more elaborative perspective. Thank you, Iftikhar, for your response.
Thank you so much, Shamsul, for your final thoughts. I think that both presentations were very informative and added a lot in terms of our historical and theoretical knowledge about issues on reinterpretation of religious texts and also social solidarity and religious freedom and harmony. So we are going to close the day one of our online conference today. And I also wish to thank all the speakers who have participated today. And of course, the participants who have stayed for last 3.5 hours, very committedly to and actively participated in all the sessions. And I hope that all of you can join us back tomorrow, 12 p.m. GMT time, and it will be 5 p.m. Pakistan time and 8 p.m. Malaysia time. So with these words, I would like to close today's session. and have a good day and good evening and good night to everyone.
Thanks a lot. Good evening.
Thank you.
Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Alaikum assalam.